When it comes to places that boast signs saying stuff like trespassers are forbidden, well, Joss Whedon led us to believe that the entrance to hell could be found in Sunnydale, California. He was actually around 7,500 miles off. What can I say? I'm a big Buffy fan. Located in the middle of the Karakum Desert in Turkmenistan is the Door to Hell, a name locals gave to a 230-foot wide crater that simply won't stop burning. Another nearby gas crater is fenced off and smells of natural gas, or should I say reeks. Now, the early years of the crater's history are kinda uncertain. Relevant records are either absent from the archives, classified, or inaccessible, which that's a little spooky. Some local geologists have claimed that the collapse into a crater happened in the 1960s, and it was set on fire only in the 1980s to prevent emissions of poisonous gases. Yikes. Others assert that the site was drilled by Soviet engineers in 1971 as an oil field, but collapsed within days, forming the crater, with the engineers choosing to flare the crater to prevent emissions of poisonous gases, but underestimating the volume of said gas. When Soviet scientists began searching for oil back in 1971, they just accidentally hit a methane reserve, and the drilling platform collapsed, thus forming said crater and releasing all those bad gases into the air. The scientists were like, let's light this on fire to try and burn off the methane, creating a Dante-esque anomaly that has remained lit for the past 50 plus years. In April of 2010, President Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedow recommended that measures be taken to limit the crater's influence on the development of other natural gas fields in the area. In January of 2022, the president announced plans to extinguish the crater, citing harmful effects on local health, the environment, and the natural gas industry. A commission was established to find the optimum technique, but despite the president's intentions, the crater remains open and burning. Just last year, the American and Turkmen governments discussed ways in which they could cooperate to permanently seal this thing. Now, that would require two things: putting out the fire and then stopping the gas from seeping out of the earth. The first step is considerably easier than the second. One could, for example, spray quick-dry cement into the crater, removing the oxygen-rich air that fuels the fires, but then the methane's gonna find other routes to the surface, adding another leaking methane source to the country's woeful tally. That means the only way to properly suffocate the gate to hell is by smothering the leak at its methane source, and short of a massive nuclear device, nobody knows how to do that. And trust me, you don't want another nuclear device in this atmosphere. So while we might not consider this evil by any demonic means, in terms of the environment, it had to top my list today. Next up, we have another tourist destination you might not want to visit: the Gulmanong Caves in Malaysia. For starters, I know the government of Canada is already advising against visiting this country as a whole because of a high risk of criminality and specific crimes I can't mention on the internet. But these caves are pure geographical wonders, with limestone walls reaching up to 300 feet in some spots, but visitors often leave the site describing it as one of the most disgusting wildlife experiences they've ever had. Oh, you want to know why? Well, that's what I'm here for. First things first, Gulmanong is home to more than 2 million bats, which leads to an impossibly thick layer of guano, otherwise known as bat poop, covering the ground. And don't even think about slipping because the handrails are apparently just as filthy as the floor. And hey, if that hasn't spooked or disgusted you enough yet, don't worry, I'm not done. If you can make it through the river of bat droppings, or the deluge, you'll then encounter several million Malaysian cockroaches just scurrying around. Ugh. I know, personally speaking, the thought of visiting anywhere with cockroaches, or like that many cockroaches, is gonna send me running for the hills faster than you can say follow the yellow brick road, so no. Absolutely not. Wherever the bat dung is, that's where the cockroaches will be, which essentially means everywhere, and that's everywhere I'm not gonna be. Finally, if you get past the bat smells, the cockroaches crawling up your legs, there are several other wonderful creatures you might just happen upon. Oh, what are they? Oh, my worst nightmares. Otherwise known as snakes, scorpions, freshwater crabs, and the infamous giant Scutigera centipedes, which are poisonous critters that are at least 3 inches long. How this place is considered a tourist attraction and not a death trap is beyond me, because it sounds like somewhere that should be just burnt. I don't do well with bugs, and the fact that there are venomous and poisonous creatures there? Absolutely not. Here's another doozy: the Belitz Hallstatten Hospital in Germany. So it might not be a bug fest or a burning pit of hell, but allow me to tell you why this place that's creepy beyond means should be avoided. Between 1898 and 1930, the complex that's roughly a 15-minute drive south of Berlin served as a tuberculosis sanatorium, which, oof. A 600-bed complex equipped with the latest technologies allowed patients to revel in the country air and undergo the primitive surgery that was standard in the pre-antibiotic age. The patient pavilion, which included terraced balconies used for air bath treatments, was divided into 4 quadrants. The women and men were housed on the west and east ends, respectively, while the north-south axis divided the contagious quarantine patients from the others. I almost feel like this goes without saying, but any buildings that used to host sanatoriums or mental institutions of any kind are almost guaranteed to have a heavy ghost presence. There was was a lot of bad things that I can't talk about in detail that kinda happened in those places. It also housed mustard gas and machine weapon victims during the First World Yikes event, including a young soldier who went on to become the evil German dictator whose name I can't say, who had been wounded in the leg. The hospital later went on to become a major treatment center for Yahtzee soldiers during the Big Bad Event No. 2, and it was used as a Soviet military hospital from 1945 until the fall of the Berlin Wall. In the chaotic interim between the fall of the wall and German reunification, a serial killer known as the Beast of Belitz began to terrorize local women connected to the sanatorium, using specifically pink lingerie to rope necklace them to death or gag them, and then laying the garment across their corpses. Later identified as Wolfgang Schmidt, he was eventually apprehended and sentenced to 15 years in detention in a psychiatric ward. In recent history, specifically in 2008, photographer and sadist Michael K. brought young model Anja P. to the site for a photo shoot in its abandoned operating theater. He then lured her to a small apartment available on the edge of campus, slugged her to death with a frying pan, and had intercourse with her corpse. I didn't mean for that to rhyme. Today, a few hospital wards are used as neurological rehabilitation centers, although the majority of the complex is abandoned. The surgery and psychiatric wards have both been left to decay and give way to nature and vandals, and the result looks like something straight out of American Horror Story, which is not exactly an enjoyable day trip for the easily spooked. I can sort of just sense the evil seeping out of there, so no thank you. So before I start getting jittery, let's go back over to the States, specifically Centriia, Pennsylvania. A lot of rhyming today. From the late 1800s to the 1960s, Centriia was a quaint but bustling town in Pennsylvania, thanks to its prosperous coal mines. Mining town. Should have known. However, when a mine mysteriously caught fire in 1962, the flames began to spread underground via the interconnecting tunnels. Although the citizens were aware of the situation, they weren't truly troubled until two isolated incidents some years later. A gas station owner reporting abnormally high gasoline temperatures in his underground tanks in 1979, and a youngin' nearly falling into a 150-foot deep sinkhole in his backyard in 1981. After those really weird occurrences, the town's population plummeted. Burning for over 50 years, Centriia, Pennsylvania's mine fire certainly seems like the fiery lair of dastardly demons and spirits. And what's more, the fire heats the groundwater to boiling temperatures, causing steam to just randomly rise from the ground. On certain days, this gives this town's landscape an unsettling, misty appearance. Speaking of that landscape, the mine fire burning under the town has left large patches of ground devoid of trees and life. Because the fire heats the surface to such a high temperature, tree roots die and the vegetation withers away, and these areas are particularly visible in the burn zone, which is near the southwest edge of the town. With only a few buildings remaining, this town is clearly an abandoned place. Most of the residents said, "See ya" a long time ago, leaving only trace signs of their lives there. As of 2021, only 4 residents remain, although it seems like a complete ghost town if you were to try and visit. Also, it has more people buried there than it has living there, which, if you're gonna drive around, you're gonna see 3 cemeteries: St. Ignatius, Saints Peter and Paul Orthodox, and Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Hey, if you ever find yourself in the deserted city, you're gonna find a lot of torn down buildings, crumbled sidewalks, and the cracked, graffiti-filled Route 61. And just in case you forgot why the town is deserted, you can occasionally just see smoke billowing out from the subterranean fires, which scientists estimate will continue to burn for another 250 years. No biggie. Alrighty, how about I end today with an abandoned island, specifically the island of Povlia. So this island is located in the lagoon near Venice and is famous for being one of the most haunted places in all of Italy. Tourists and locals alike are banned from going here because it was used for centuries as a place to exile the sick, to prevent the spread of disease and contain the mentally ill in an asylum built in the late 1800s. So in 1348, the bubonic plague arrived in Venice, and Poveglia, like many other small islands at the time, became a quarantine colony. This plague on average killed 1 out of 3 Europeans, and fearing the unbridled spread of the disease, Venice was like, okay, if you're showing any symptoms, here you go, out you get, not here. At the island's center, the dead and those too sick to protest were kind of burnt on giant pyres, and this included the tens of thousands of citizens dying on the mainland. Now these fires would burn once more in 1630 when the Black Death came sweeping through. The small island was used as a mass burial ground, and ashes from human remains make up as much as 50% of the island's soil, so I hope it's a good fertilizer? The deaths of nearly 160,000 people on the island have given it its nickname, the Island of Ghosts. A doctor at the asylum was known to have experimented, by the way, on the patients there with lobotomies, and he jumped from the bell tower in the 1930s after claiming he had been driven mad by ghosts. I wonder why. Decades later, nearby residents still claim to hear the bell, even though it was removed many years earlier. A report titled Haunted History states that some restoration work had started, but stopped without any explanation. Okay, maybe I don't want to visit there. How about we kick off today with Whitby Abbey over in Yorkshire. Known for its eerie cameo in the Bram Stoker novel, Dracula, one of my favorites, Whitby Abbey has been a pilgrimage for many horror fans, goths, and, well, vampires over the centuries. The 1897 novel featured the famous vampire posing as a large dog, which came ashore in Whitby and runs up the iconic 199 steps to the graveyard of St. Mary's Church in the shadow of the Abbey ruins. Trust me when I say it's currently on my bucket list of ideal travel locations. And hey, as if the gothic vibe and Dracula's connection isn't spine-tingling enough, Atmospheric Abbey is said to be home to the ghost of a young nun who was bricked up alive in the walls after breaking her vows. It is also said that St. Hilda, who founded the abbey, roams the grounds and looks down onto the town from the highest windows. St. Hilda is apparently also joined by Constance de Beverley, who is the nun who broke her vows of chastity, and you can still hear her today pleading for her release. According to the Whitby Guide, the town is jam-packed full of spirits and ghostly goings-on. There are more of Whitby's ghosts found in one of the 2 lighthouses on its coast. One lighthouse is said to be visited by a one-armed ghost of a man who fell to his death onto the rocks under said lighthouse. Now, this entity does much more than simply try to scare people to the location. He attempts to trip you so you can join him in the afterlife. And a phantom hearse with 4 headless horses and a headless driver has been spotted in front of St. Mary's Church. Which, yes, the church that's in the shadow of the abbey. Whitby is also home to the Barghest Hound, which is said to be a glowing-eyed hound of hell. This hound is said to roam the streets, and only those who are going to die soon are able to hear its deathly growl. Now, there are several hotels in the area that are said to be home to many ghostly visitors, the oldest being a Tudor mansion built in 1516. Bagdale Hall is said to be haunted by its former owner, Brown Bushell, who was executed for his acts of piracy. The ghost of Brown is said to roam the halls and stairways, and has also been blamed for several reports of poltergeist activity. The streets of Whitby are also home to a lot of other apparitions that are just meandering around after dark. I know one is a coach, which is pulled to the graves of sailors in St. Mary's Churchyard by those headless horses. Now, the passengers are the skeletons of sailors who make the trip on the 3rd day after the funeral to pay their respects and gather the corpses of the fallen sailors so that they can join them. Like, seriously, that many ghosts? Alright, how about we talk about Margam Country Park over in West Glamorgan. Folks, I tried with the pronunciations, I looked them up, I swear. So this park in South Wales is home to the ruined Capel Mar Eri Bryn, where the presence of unwelcoming ancient monks has been felt. And you know, at the end of the day, it's a big gothic castle stalked by the spirit of a rageful and unjustly being, not to be Robert Scott, by the way, a gamekeeper that worked at the castle for many years. It is thought that he was wrongly killed by a poacher, and his spirit still rages around the grounds today. Now, he's been seen ascending the gothic staircase with a lot of purpose, just being like, no, this is my castle. His presence has come forward regularly with psychic investigators, all of whom have insisted his spirit is consumed with rage over his unjust killing. Also, you can hear the sounds of giggling young people. I think that's heard pretty frequently throughout the long corridors and the dramatic rooms of the family areas. There have also been reports of small spirits in Victorian dress seen drifting in and out of doorways and mischievously moving objects. The large figure of the blacksmith is also a familiar vision to many of the gamekeepers and guarding staff today, who maintain the vast castle grounds. At night, the castle security guards have reported the noise of running footsteps and chattering voices with no sign of anybody else in the building. Reports of cold spots and orbs in the castle are frighteningly abundant on paranormal activity nights. Now, this castle sits nestled on an 850-acre country estate, roughly 2 miles from Port Talbot. So technically, it is a Victorian-era country home, but it was built to look like a castle, so that's why I've been calling it a castle today. I believe it was built between 1830 to 40, and it was commissioned after Christopher Rice Mansell Talbot returned from a grand tour of Europe, where he'd fallen in love with the Gothic architecture. And he was home, he's like, yeah, I want something similar. It's his family estate after all. There had already been a family home prior to this, but he was like, out you go. I want this. The family remained with the house until 1942, when it was finally sold to Sir David Evans Bevan. However, He was like, this is a bit too big for my needs, but he couldn't find anybody who would take it on, so it slowly fell into disrepair before the county council took it on in 1974. Now, devastatingly, in 1977, a fire caused extensive damage to the building and everything within. But hey, there's a restoration project still ongoing. And even though the castle, as it stands, was relatively new in history, the land itself had actually been in use for a lot longer and is thought to have been occupied for around 4,000 years. There is actual evidence that Bronze Age people settled in the area, with several burial mounds being discovered in the park. There was also evidence of Roman occupation. There's a lot of ghost seeds and a lot of history. The ruins of the abbey remain on the grounds, after being destroyed like many others during the dissolution of the monasteries in 1537. But like, come on. How does this not sound like a really cool place to go visit? Okay, I guess it's time to travel to a different part of the world to visit the Freemantle Art Centre in Western Australia. It was founded in 1964 and is a World Heritage Site. So, one little thing, it was initially built by convicts and served as a hospital for mentally ill and a lot of settlers, and was named the Freemantle Lunatic Asylum. Hundreds of patients were in crowded quarters, and they were suffering from alcoholism, sunstroke, you name it. People were forced to live in deplorable conditions because they were all criminally mentally ill. And as a result, well, that many people, you're gonna get some terrible incidents. One of these included a patient who killed a woman called Mrs. Clifford, and another patient took their own life. People reported seeing another phantom woman who was thought to be the ghost of a woman who was taken in after her daughter was abducted. And after her horrific experience, the poor woman suffered from, well, psychiatric problems. She took her life by leaping from a first-floor window, and in that same room, people report hearing a young voice, believed to be that of her daughter. One person who has seen a disturbing full apparition at the art center is renowned medium Anthony Brelska, also known as Australia's Ghost Whisperer. He joined a television team staying overnight in the building, filming a documentary on the hauntings. And he's like, locked in an asylum at 3 a.m. wasn't my idea of a good time, because it was that night when Anthony saw the very tough and hardened spirit of a man standing halfway down a corridor. And the temperature in that area dropped from 22 degrees to less than 16 in an area of like 3 meters. Anthony was like, yeah, I'm feeling kind of uneasy about this. His impressions were that it wasn't an inmate to the asylum when it was operating, but a very nasty nurse or warden type. And with that type of energy, he can't even begin to fathom the types of things that this warden did to those poor souls who were patients in that place so many years ago. This very unpleasant man had been there a very long time. And how did he know that? Well, it's because of his demeanor and his dress. Anthony later discovered that several security guards refused to enter that part of the asylum after a couple had been pushed down a stairwell. He's like, yeah, I knew this nasty person was responsible. He later moved into an area that he describes as one of the most haunted locations he had ever visited. The thing that he noticed almost immediately when he entered the area was a strong smell of burning, like the overpowering, really bad stench of flesh burning. And it wasn't until the next morning that he learned that the area had been used at the turn of the century to administer electric shock treatments to his patients. So throughout history, there was a lot of American soldiers who would be stationed at the building. Yeah, they got spooked. They would hear odd whisperings, bangings, noises at night. Even some folks got touched by ghostly hands, and they were like, yep, nope. Even today, a lot of visitors experience weird phenomena. Even tour guides. Like, there was a group in a closed room, and they all heard what appeared to be heavy clanking footsteps coming towards the door. And they stopped in front of the door, and when they opened it, there was nobody there. There's one visitor who reported being touched by phantom lips from the kissing ghost. Another story that's been told is about a young girl who was locked in one of the old cells in the building, and she started banging on the door, pleading to be let out. And at that time, every window in the building vibrated violently, and doors started opening and closing by themselves. Maybe it's time to plan a visit to Australia. Okay, here is a place that should not be visited, but still warrants a mention today. Nua'umilu in Hawaii. Hawaiian locals have requested that tourists stop visiting for a plethora of reasons. The island state is burdened by over-tourism, and it's becoming a big problem for ecological and resource purposes. Let's just say virtually we're going to take a trip right now. We're not going to go there in person, we're just going to do this virtually. So if you were to visit Hawaii's Waipio Valley, a paradise of waterfalls and black sand beaches surrounded by cliffs, it's doubtful you're gonna think, this must be a gate to hell. Well, according to ancient folklore, Waipio is the access point to Nua'umilu, or the land of the dead. As the story goes, the souls of the deceased leaped from the tall sea cliffs to enter an underworld ruled by the death god Milu. Milu was the deity of death, and his name was synonymous with the realm itself, virtually identical to the Greco-Roman tradition and, Hades. The tradition goes on to suggest that his subterranean entrance has long since been buried beneath the black sands deposited over a millennia of sweeping ocean tides. Now, According to locals, spirits of the dead can and do observe the living from this realm, rewarding honorable deeds of their ancestors, and can likewise punish them by turning the living into stone by staring at them with discontent. The valley was also the original throne of the ancient Hawaiian kings, who ruled from their stone temples and their grass palaces with 4 20-foot tall trees, all bejeweled with hibiscus blossoms. There's been many other myths as well, and legends of deities, demons, demigods, and more that emanate from this holy place. Just don't go visit it. Time to end today with a doozy. Bourj Arbabas in Turkey. The happiest place on earth? This isn't. This place was originally intended to be a thriving town with 732 identical castles available as vacation homes for anyone who could pay the price, which was around $500,000. With construction starting in 2014 and planning in place for sports facilities, movie theaters, and Turkish baths, the $200 million project fell apart with only 587 buildings completed. In 2018, Turkey's currency and debt crisis began, and the development went bankrupt. But the eerie, perfect castles of the abandoned city are still there though, with turrets, Juliet balconies, and pristine white stones, just waiting for someone to come in on a white horse and save them from eventual ruin. So sure, while this place not be as obviously haunted or full of creepy history as the other entries on today's list, just looking at photos of the abandoned homes gives me the creeps. There's something weird about it just waiting to be uncovered. And I'm not about to be the sacrificial lamb that's going to unlock the secrets. Thank you very much.
Number 5 on this list is the Devil's Pond. The Devil's Pond is a very beautiful and calm looking body of water on the outside, but it's far more dangerous when you step inside. Located in the Queensland forest, the pond itself almost looks like something straight out of a fairy tale, but there's no happy ending here. 19 people have died in this tiny little pond. That's a staggering amount of people considering how small this one area is. In fact, so many people have had tragic endings here that there's literally a sign that says the creek has claimed many lives. Think about that. It sounds like something straight from a Scooby-Doo story. Beware of this pond or else, but like seriously, beware of the pond. An ancient Aboriginal legend tells us of how a runaway bride fell to her death here as she was escaping her wedding. The bride was named Ulana, and it's believed that she is actually the cause of the many deaths that have happened here. It's said that she lures and tricks people into coming towards her, and then they fall in and suffer the same fate that happened to her so many years ago. I'm not sure if the bride legend is true or not, but even if it isn't, this is clearly an incredibly dangerous spot in its own right. Australia is a big place, so don't feel like this is your only option if you're going for a swim when you're there. Number 4 on this list is the National Film and Sound Archive. Located in Canberra, which I actually just discovered is the capital city of Australia. Always thought it was Sydney, but actually it's Canberra, so that's fun. But anyways, the Film and Sound Archive is a staple of media culture in Australia. It just hasn't always been that way. Crypto-naturalist Tim says the NFSA building is regarded by many ghost hunters or paranormal aficionados as not only one of the most haunted in Canberra, but also one of the most haunted in Australia. It's not because it houses spooky movies though. The ghosts that are reported in the building stem from the period that it was the Institute of Anatomy. That's right guys, this building prior to being what it is now was housing and studying dead bodies for 50 whole years. There were countless scientific experiments that went on here on hundreds to potentially even thousands of corpses. During this time, it was a museum as well and showcased the dead bodies to those who visited here. Because of all this death, the place is pretty popular among the ghosts. Apparently, the dissection rooms are the most popular with many paranormal sightings here over the years. There's also a little girl who many visitors have seen. She lives in the air vents of the building and pops out through the grates every now and again. Luckily enough, her intentions aren't evil though, and often tries to make people laugh. That being said, I still don't think that going to this place that used to house a bunch of dead bodies is the best idea. We have Netflix for a reason now guys, so let's use it. Number 3 on this list is the Beachworth Asylum. Ah yes, the classic haunted asylum. It feels like every country has one, but Australia's is particularly bad. The hospital opened in 1867 and was operational until 1995 when it was finally shut down. During that span when it was functioning, the asylum had over 3,000 patients die in its walls. That is an absurd number of people for a mental hospital. Part of this was because the methods that they used at this place weren't the best. Like most asylums that started in the 1800s, the treatments that they had for people dealing with mental health problems were far from ideal. Shock therapy, shackling patients up, just blatant torture were all things that went down at this asylum. Obviously, this didn't help anyone in dealing with their issues and caused a lot of people to pass away early. Now, these spirits of those who died here haunt the building. Screams can be heard ringing throughout the walls, with people thinking it's the ghosts of those who were being shocked or tortured. Some have reported seeing the ghosts of nurses walking around the building. These aren't your typical kind nurses though. People have said that they look evil and unforgiving. Deep feelings of depression can be felt here, and just a strong feeling of uneasiness. Personally, I see absolutely no reason to visit this horrible place ever, and in all honesty, I'm kind of surprised that the building is still standing. Number 2 on this list is the Monte Cristo Homestead. Built over 150 years ago, this home has had such a tragic history that many believe it to be Australia's most haunted home, and honestly, after reading about the horrific things that happened here, I totally understand why. Australian Geographic writes, a chain of violent events in the house have triggered other supernatural incidents. A maid once plummeted to her death from the upstairs balcony, and the figure of a woman in period dress has been seen walking along the veranda to the blood-stained steps where she fell. A stable boy who burned to death in his bed at the hands of his master is thought to haunt the coach house, while the ghost of a mentally disabled man named Harold wanders the grounds. Kept chained in the caretaker's cottage for 40 years, Harold was found curled up at the feet of his mother's dead body. He died shortly after being sent to a home for the insane. The sound of clanking chains is said to warn of his approach. All of those things are super scary to begin with, but the most cited ghost at this home isn't even mentioned there. Elizabeth Crawley inherited this house from her husband who passed in 1910, and her ghost has never left. After her husband died, she went into a deep depression and would rarely leave the home. She converted one of the upstairs rooms into a space to perform rituals. It's said that after her husband died, she only left this house twice and eventually died in it by herself. Now, you'll know her ghost is present because there'll be a sudden and stark change in temperature whenever she nears. All of this lore has, of course, created a ton of interest around the home, and it's been featured on several Australian ghost television shows through the years. However, you can also stay at this home if you wanted for $200 a night and experience all of this ghostly stuff for yourself. Why you would want to pay $200 of your actual money to get haunted and potentially even cursed is beyond me, but hey, to each their own, I guess. And finally, number 1 on this list is Port Arthur. Port Arthur is located in the Australian state of Tasmania, which is actually an island state 240 kilometers off of the Australian mainland. Port Arthur initially served as a penal site by the British Empire several hundreds of years ago. Towards the end of the 1700s, Britain stopped sending their prisoners to the Americas and instead started shipping them to Australia. What's even better than going to the mainland, though, was this small island state that they also owned in the middle of nowhere. Countless prisoners over the following decades were shipped off to Tasmania, with Port Arthur being one of the biggest final destinations for these criminals. Once they got there, their lives were never the same. Many of these people that were shipped here had committed small crimes out of sheer necessity, stealing some food to survive or something to keep their families warm. The severity of the crime mattered little to the British authorities though, and even if it was something as small and insignificant as this, you could very easily find yourself stuck in this prison for the remainder of your life. The prisoners that got sent here were forced to work tirelessly in the timber, lumbering, and shipbuilding industries. Port Arthur actually boomed for the next 100 years, with more and more convicts being sent here. This was obviously very beneficial for the British government, but not so much so for the people who had to make this place their home. Many of them were mercilessly killed for no good reason. They were often tortured consistently if they weren't working hard enough or had done something that wasn't totally up to the standard. It really was a horrible way of life for those who got sent to Port Arthur. At around the end of the 1800s, Port Arthur started to slow down and eventually stopped altogether. The death of this location didn't end though, because in 1996, Port Arthur saw one of Australia's darkest moments ever. 35 people were gunned down in a mass shooting that took place at Port Arthur. All of this death from various generations has caused Port Arthur to be one of Australia's most haunted spots. In fact, over the years, there have been more than 2,000 incidents of unexplained paranormal activity. Things moving, voices shrieking, change in temperature, you name it, it's taken place at this location before. The asylum at Port Arthur is said to be the most haunted spot here, with reports of people getting scratched and touched by unseen entities. Port Arthur has had a horrible history to it, and it's not a place I'd recommend venturing out to if you do happen to catch yourself in the Australian state of Tasmania. Number 5 on this list is Tranquil Sanatorium in British Columbia. Tranquil Sanatorium has quite an extensive and tragic history to it, which has caused its walls to be the home to many undead spirits. A sanatorium, if you weren't familiar, is an establishment which has the sole purpose of housing those with long-term illnesses and is often associated with tuberculosis. The one that we're talking about right now is no different. It was built in 1907 as a facility to treat people with tuberculosis. However, it didn't stay like this for very long. The purpose of the facility eventually changed to become an insane asylum. It acted as this mental institute for a while until finally becoming abandoned in the late 1980s. Due to its deep history with death, disease, mental illness, it's no wonder that the Tranquil Sanatorium is now deeply haunted. The layout of this facility screams something out of a Stephen King book. It has several buildings that are connected by poorly lit underground tunnels. The building itself looks all too eerie from the outside as well, with dirty cream-colored walls that have seen far better days as rot and mold slowly devour them. Visitors of this place report feeling extremely uneasy. A common note for most people that visit is the presence of orbs, strange balls of light that flutter throughout the building and then disappear. Some people have reported seeing a ghostly apparition on the 6th floor. This ghost takes the form of a woman not older than 30. She appears to be crying and screaming. The tunnels are said to be particularly haunted. People have reported screams coming from nowhere, flashes of movement, menacing and animalistic groans that make you feel as if somebody is right behind you. Children can also be heard playing every now and again in some of the more open areas of the building. Clearly, this place's dark history has impacted it greatly, and just because physical humans decided to abandon it in the 80s doesn't mean that it was truly abandoned for good. Number 4 on this list is the Firkens House. The Firkens House is part of Fort Edmonton Park, which, you guessed it, is located in Edmonton, Alberta. Fort Edmonton Park is a little tourist attraction that has buildings from 1885, 1905, and 1920 to represent the homes of the time. One of the houses is the Firkens House. This home is interesting because during my research, I couldn't find any particular evidence of wrongdoings or tragic events at this home. In fact, for the most part, it seems like a pretty normal house. People have lived there before and no harm has befell them, but it seems that after they moved out and the home was donated, that's when things started to go a little bit haywire. There are reportedly 3 ghosts or demons that haunt this home, each one scarier and more dangerous than the next. The first one is the ghost of a beautiful floating woman who is dressed in all white. People have said that they've spotted her in the windows of the home looking out at them or slowly drifting throughout the living room. The second one is the ghost of a little boy. The boy will appear to certain people looking extremely ill. It is currently unknown if this boy died in and around the area or what disease he is suffering from, but it is said that he resides in the home with the woman in white. The third being is by far the scariest of all 3. A ventriloquist dummy that will appear in the home or in the cupboards. This thing can move all by itself and talk by itself. It is very similar to the popular horror franchise Chucky, and it's said by some to be seeking to harm the living. I'm not sure if the ghost of the ventriloquist has taken over this dummy or if the dummy has taken on its own persona, but I definitely do not want to go anywhere where the primary residence is a demon puppet. Number 3 on this list is the 5 Fisherman restaurant. This is a restaurant in Halifax, Nova Scotia, known for its exceptional oysters and also its ghostly inhabitants. The ground that this restaurant sits on wasn't always utilized for serving up fish and chips though. In fact, it has a very long history. In the early 1800s is when the building went up, and for a long time it acted as the town's only school. Nothing ghoulish or demonic about that. However, at around the turn of the century, the school moved and the building took on a new purpose. It became the mortuary for Halifax and made its dealings with the dead. Now, not every mortuary is going to become haunted, but this one had quite a lot to deal with over the years. In 1912, the unsinkable ship, the Titanic, sunk. It sunk roughly 640 kilometers off of the eastern shores of Canada, and therefore the closest places to assist with the rescue was these eastern provinces. Halifax acted as the leader in these rescue processes, and because of that, the mortuary had an onslaught of bodies of people whom had died on the ship. 5 years after that tragedy, Halifax incurred one of their own with the massive Halifax explosion. This was where a munitions ship exploded and it killed roughly 2,000 people just like that. This mortuary served as the primary designation for both of these incidents, and due to the unnatural deaths here, it makes sense that some spirits have clung on. Guests and employees alike have reported seeing ghosts all over this mortuary that turned restaurant. One of the dishwashers reported running out of the restaurant when he looked up from what he was doing and was staring directly at a ghost-like specter. The restaurant has attempted to have serious renovations done. However, I don't think that any amount of structural changes will get these spirits to rest for good. Number 2 on this list is the Frank Slide. Now, even though the Frank Slide sounds like it could be a fun, popular dance move that takes over TikTok for a few weeks, it is far more morbid than that. On April 29th in 1903, in the mining town of Frank, which at that time was part of the Northwest Territories, but it is now a section of Alberta, there was a horrible tragedy. 110 million tons of limestone and rock came tumbling down in one of Canada's biggest landslides ever. This fell onto part of the town of Frank. Frank was located right next to Turtle Mountain, which after extensive mining had grown unstable. On April 29th, it all came crashing down and claimed the lives of 70 to 90 people. It is still to this day Canada's most deadly landslide to ever occur in history, and was a horrible tragedy that can only remind us how fleeting life can be. I think the craziest part about this landslide as well is that it wasn't just miners who were killed. Their wives, their families, all of them died at the hands of the Frank Slide. The remains of these bodies were never recovered either, as the damage from the slide was far too devastating. Where all of this happened is now a section of a town called Crow's Nest Pass, and over a century later, the ghosts of the dead still haunt the area. This place is somewhere where visitors have reported feeling very unsafe. They say that the overall feelings of uneasiness are almost too much to bear and that they have to leave. Cries, howls, screams, this can all be heard late at night as you're trying to sleep. Lanterns will be seen in the night walking around at the hands of unknown apparitions. It is basically a full ghost town of people who never deserved to die in the first place, all wanting to get a second just to feel their lives again as they were so unfairly ripped away from them. Definitely one of Canada's most horrific tragedies, and now home to one of its most haunted locations. Number 1 on this list is the Banff Springs Hotel. This hotel is located in Banff, Alberta, and is truly one of the creepiest places that I've ever read about. Now, first off, I want to note the hotel itself looks gorgeous on the outside. The beautiful nature it is surrounded by is stunning, and the hotel gives me some serious Harry Potter Hogwarts vibes. However, when I say that this place is surrounded by nature, I really mean it. It is totally out on its own, with no other buildings in sight at all. The secluded site has been around for 132 years and has housed its fair share of visitors. Some of these visitors have had some incredible stays. I mean, when you look it up online, the hotel has a 4.7 Google rating, so I mean, it's pretty freaking good. Some of the guests, though, they never checked out. In the 1920s, a couple was set to have their wedding at this hotel. On the day of the ceremony, though, the bride, while she was walking down one of the hotel's beautiful marble staircases, tripped and fell, smacking her head on her descent and dying on the spot. This bride's spirit is one of the most notable sightings people have had when they're staying at this hotel. It's said that they often see a phantom in a wedding dress ascending and descending the stairs very quickly. She's also been seen in the ballroom dancing alone, potentially dreaming of the dance that she wanted so desperately to have with the husband that she never got to marry. In 1975, a longtime bellman of the hotel, Sam, died there. Since then, sightings of Sam have been pretty consistent. One story details how 2 women lost their room key and called the front desk to go and get it. The front desk person sent someone to go and open their room for these ladies. When that person had got there, though, the ladies were already in the room and said that another bellman had let them in. They described Sam to a T when they spoke about the bellman who helped them out. Instances like this have occurred time and time again at the hotel, with many people believing his spirit is still working there. Finally, with this hotel, hotel, you have room 873. Room 873 is rumored to be the home of a gruesome murder. One evening, a family was staying there and the father, for some unknown reason, lost his mind, murdering his family and himself. After completely refurbishing the room, the hotel put it back in service, but now people who have stayed there report hearing the screams and the cries as if they were still dying. If you have to stay at this hotel, definitely avoid room 873. Number 5 on this list is Villa Paula. This haunted place is located in Miami and has quite the interesting guest in the backyard. Thrillist says this stately white mansion was originally constructed as the Cuban consulate in the mid-1920s, home to Consul Domingo Millard and his wife, Paula. The Cuban-born Paula was known to spend her days playing piano and drinking Cuban coffee until she died from complications from a leg amputation in 1932. Legend has it that Domingo interred his late wife in a sarcophagus laid in the backyard. The sarcophagus is still there now, covered by ficus tree roots and nearly impossible to reach. Whether or not it actually contains her mortal remains is debatable at best, but reports of her ghost persist. It's said her ghost is in different rooms there, says History Miami's Dr. Paul George. People who've lived at Villa Paula since have had existential kinds of experiences. Among them, phantom coffee smells and piano playing, a one-legged woman roaming about as well. So there is a literal sarcophagus just chilling in this person's backyard. Can you imagine having that just show up on the house listing? I'd be like, no, we are not okay with that. I'm kind of surprised that no one has gone to go deal with the sarcophagus before. I mean, you can't just leave this thing down there like that and expect the ghost to just go away. I would imagine that Paula's spirit is probably tied to the sarcophagus and in turn it's tied to the area. Granted, I do kind of understand why no one wants to dig it up. Think about all the crazy stuff that's happened with the pyramids. You dig up this sarcophagus and you might end up being cursed for life, which is obviously something that nobody wants. But now we're left in this awkward place where we can't get rid of the ghost, but at the same time can't live here either. That's why I'm recommending to all of you watching, just avoid Villa Paula altogether. Number 4 on this list is the Blue Anchor Pub. So this is an interesting one because this pub didn't actually start in Florida. Thrillist says this pub was built in 1840s London during Jack the Ripper times, so it should be no surprise that it's haunted. The story goes that the bar was raised in London, but its wooden interiors were sent to New York City and then onto this sleepy Florida town in 1996. Little did anyone know that the pub's original elements came with the ghost of Bertha Starkley, a cheating wife who was murdered by her husband. Today, she can be heard rattling pots, knocking things over, and wailing in the middle of the night at the Blue Anchor. Every night around 10 p.m., the time that she was murdered, Bertha likes to remind everyone she's still here, so the current owners ring the ship's bell to scare her away. So, first thing, I've never actually heard of that before, where they take a building from one continent and then just decide to move it over to another continent. This bar must look pretty cool on the inside to go to all that trouble though. Obviously this was a bit of a mistake and everyone would have been better served if we relocated this thing straight to the dump. Bertha doesn't care if it's in London or America or anywhere. As long as the structure of this pub is still intact, her ghost will still be floating around, which makes it very hard to enjoy a night out at this place. Like imagine drowning several pints, going to take a piss, and then getting ambushed by some 1800s ghost in the bathroom with your pee-pee hanging out. Like, I don't know if I'd ever be able to recover from that, folks. Number 3 on this list is St. Augustine's Lighthouse. Ah yes, the haunted lighthouse, a true classic. Thrillist says St. Augustine's iconic lighthouse is a Florida landmark built in 1874. but climb up its 219 steps, and it's not just the views that will take your breath away. First, there's the ghost of Joseph Andrew, the original lighthouse keeper who fell to his death while painting the 165-foot tower. Then there are the Pity's two daughters who were playing with a building cart when it broke loose and slid into the nearby bay, drowning them both. While the girls giggle and run up and down the lighthouse steps, Joseph has been reported smoking cigars at the top of the lighthouse, keeping watch over his forever home. You know guys, if I had to be a ghost, then being Joseph wouldn't be the worst. I get to look out at the pretty scenery at the top of my lighthouse where hardly anyone bothers me, and I get to smoke cigars all day. Like, obviously I wouldn't want to be a ghost, but if I had to be, then this wouldn't be that bad. Either way, I'm not a ghost now. I am very much a human being, and if I want to stay a human being, then I recommend avoiding this place. It can obviously be very jarring to see two little ghost girls running around, and even though all of these ghosts are supposed to be pretty chill, we know that the paranormal can be unpredictable. I'm sure that there are tons of other non-haunted Florida lighthouses around if you're really pining for a good view. Number 2 on this list is Fort East Martello. If you don't like dolls, then you really won't like this one, guys. Thrillist says, if there is one rule all Floridians follow, it's do not mess with Robert the doll. The 4-foot figurine has terrorized anyone who hasn't taken him seriously since he was gifted to artist Robert Jean Otto in 1904. Otto blamed any mischievous act around him on Robert the doll, effectively coining the oft-repeated Robert did it mantra. The doll currently holds court inside Fort East Martello, where he lives inside a glass case surrounded by a constant soundtrack of haunting xylophone music. The room evokes a heavy air immediately upon entering, and the walls are papered with apology notes from cocky tourists who've dared cross the world's most haunted plaything. Even the Prince of Darkness himself, Ozzy Osbourne, felt Robert's wrath when he suffered a series of health mishaps shortly after dissing the doll on his reality show. I don't like dolls, folks, especially the haunted variety, so this entry obviously had to make the list. Clearly it curses you after you see it because people literally have to come back here and ask for its forgiveness. I don't know if the notes work or not, but I guess that's all you can do when you're dealing with a haunted doll. Hopefully this doll can just chill out and stop haunting people, but in the meantime, I just flat out avoid going to this place in Florida altogether. And number 1 on this list is Casa Monica Resort and Spa. It really sucks that this place is so haunted because it's truly beautiful. Thrillist says St. Augustine's fanciest hotel is also its most haunted. In fact, this 5-star Mediterranean revival haunt is a hotbed of spectral activity. Children are heard running along the 4th floor, but no one is there. The radio in the Ponce de Leon suite randomly comes on, but no one's there. Guests of room 411 wake up to people staring at them, but no one's there. But it's the 3-story Flagler suite high in the tower that's most haunted. Maids have seen a child's handprint appear on the 1st floor bathroom mirror, and after knocking, one heard a man say, "We've been expecting you," from an empty bedroom. Its spookiest claim to fame, however, is the male ghost staring out of the top tower window. He's believed to be the ghost of one of 2 people, either Franklin Smith, the architect who built the hotel, or Henry Flagler, the man who purchased it. I personally don't care if it's the architect, the man who purchased it, or God. Anyone who says, "I've been waiting for you as I enter an empty bedroom," it's not the type of individual I want to be around. Also, where are these children coming from and what are those sounds? Okay, so you want to tell me a scary story where the architect of the building fell in love with his work and then when he died, his ghost stayed here. Alright, fine, I can buy that, I can believe that, but like, what are the children doing here? What do they have to do with this place and the architect? Maybe this is just one of those spots where it doesn't matter what happened here, it doesn't matter what will happen here in the future, it's just always destined to be haunted.
In at number 5 we have Whispers Estate. The Whispers Estate was built around 1894, and between 1899 and 1901 is when Dr. George and Sarah White moved in. George was a successful physician and ran his practice from their home. The two adopted many orphaned children, and unfortunately several passed away in the house over the years. Some of the children they took in were troubled. Many of them passed away in the bedrooms and other areas of the home, and even some of Dr. White's patients have been said to have also passed while in the home. Dr. White practiced in the home for over 25 years, so it's probable but unknown how many over the years had passed in the home. In the early 2000s, the home underwent renovations and a lot of bizarre activity began. Many claim that lights would flicker on and off, footsteps would be heard stomping around on the second floor, and as time went on, the activity escalated. To this day, people reserve time to come and experience all this paranormal activity, and are encouraged to write down any experiences they had while in the home, and these accounts are posted to the Whispers Estate's official Facebook page. You can go through the page and find creepy photos people have taken that show demonic figures, ghost-like creatures, and even orbs. It's also pretty common for the guests to be scratched up by unseen fingernails or touched by an unseen hand. The estate earned the Whispers moniker after the numerous guests that experienced somebody whispering in their ear, somebody they couldn't see. Due to the amount of people who have passed at the home in its early days, it's like there are a number of different spirits that haunt the estate to this day. The Whispers Estate is known as the 4th most haunted house in the United States, but many who have visited believe it to be the most haunted house in the entire country. In at number 4 we have Rhodes Hotel. The Rhodes Hotel was established in 1893 and was named after the first owners, Clara and Newton Rhodes. The youngest child in the Rhodes family, Everett, passed in one of the second-story bedrooms after contracting tuberculosis at 18 years old. Soon after their daughter's death, Newton unfortunately died, and it's believed he had died inside of the house. After Newton's passing, Clara turned the house into a dual brothel and speakeasy. It's said that one of the ladies of the night, Sarah, still haunts her bedroom tucked behind the stairs on the second floor. After Clara's death, the family home was opened as a hotel in the late 1800s and was meant to house those flocking to East Central Indiana during the natural gas boom. It's even believed that John Dillinger and Al Capone stopped at the hotel for a stay after hitching a ride on a train to Indiana. Not only did the family pass in their home, but a preacher by the name of Lester Poor supposedly hanged himself in the attic during the time when the home was converted to a hotel. But many believe his death could have been a murder. Due to the hotel's rich history, many locals and visitors have experienced paranormal activity, and everyone in the town knew that many spirits that passed in the building still haunt it to this day. The hotel closed its doors in 1937 and the property remained in the Rhodes family hands but sat empty for more than 30 years. The hotel and its contents were eventually auctioned off and it landed on the National Register of Historic Places, and the hotel saw 3 owners before the Haleys took it over for restoration. The Rhodes Hotel was purchased by Clint and Linda Haley in 1995, and they heard rumors about the haunting of the hotel, but this didn't faze them. They were more worried about the work they'd have to do to restore the home. The Haleys claim that they didn't encounter any paranormal activity, but many find that hard to believe. The hotel was up for sale again in 2017 when a man by the name of Couch took it over for his charity. Couch had launched the Lost Limbs Foundation 4 years earlier, which raised funds for prosthetic limbs for children. To this day, Couch's charity has owned and run the hotel. Not only had it been named among Indiana's most haunted places, but the hotel is consistently booked for private and paranormal investigations. The overnight investigation tickets can get up to $200, and this hotel attracts people from across the country. There have been many investigators that believe there is extensive activity in this old hotel, and people have captured a figure-like shadow moving across the living room curtains with the use of night vision cameras. Most commonly, people hear whispers and the second floor creaking when no one is inside. Unlike the Haleys, Couch said he's seen and heard supernatural happenings in the hotel since moving onto the property in 2017. He's heard footsteps on the staircase, the property camera has turned off randomly, and picked up voices before the footage flickers back on. Once, while hosting an investigation, Couch said he witnessed one of many Victorian dolls left behind from a previous owner jump off of its chair. In at number 3 we have Avon Bridge. The Avon Bridge is known to be haunted by almost every local living in the area. It is a massive trip-arch railroad trestle spinning a rural road over White Lick Creek. The bridge is a fascinating landmark in Hendricks County with lots of legends and history surrounding it, some more sinister than others. There are a few historical facts about the bridge that we do know. It was built in 1906 off County Road 625, was designed by W.M. Dunn, and is still used today. Many haunted stories surround this bridge and the area surrounding it. One story claims that a mother had been walking on the tracks and fell to her death. The mother's wailing could be heard when you drive under the bridge. It's common for many locals to honk when driving under the bridge in an effort to muffle her screams. Another story is that a drunk rail worker slipped during construction and was buried alive in the wet cement. The tale is that when a train goes over the bridge, people claim to still hear his moaning. Many locals say that if you go near the bridge at night, you will hear moaning and can see a ghostly figure of a ghost, or even 2 or 3 at a time. If you're traveling near the bridge on a hot summer day, you may be witness to the ghost tears streaming down the concrete. Many people don't even refer to it as the Avon Bridge. It's often called the Haunted Avon Bridge because of the number of accounts of ghost sightings and constant sounds of the moans and screams heard from the ghosts that haunt the bridge. In at number 2 we have James Allison Mansion. The James Allison Mansion was built for James Allison, and it was a dream home, done in a grand design and style that exhibited James's wealth and importance. James was an important figure in the auto and plane industry, greatly helping in the development of cars and airplanes. He founded the Cristo Light Company, which produced the first efficient headlight for early automobiles, and was a founding partner in Carl Fisher's Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He also started Allison Engineering Company, which evolved and transformed into an aircraft engine make known today as the Allison division of Rolls-Royce. James purchased the 65-acre estate, and he and his wife Sarah built this glorious mansion, starting construction in 1911 and finishing in 1913. The massive home had an elevator, a billiard room, an indoor pool in the basement, a breakfast room, a library, a grand kitchen, and even pumped-in ice water. 15 years after the Allisons built their forever home, James then fell in love with his secretary, and he divorced his wife Sarah in 1928. Only a month later, James married this former employee, Lucille Musset. However, James contracted a fatal case of pneumonia and died shortly after marrying his second wife at the age of 56. In 1936, the estate went up for sale, and that same year it was bought by Sisters of St. Francis of Oldenburg. The former Allison home became a home for the college's library, administrative offices, classrooms, and sleeping quarters for the sisters. There have been many things seen and heard throughout the years since it became a college. There was a girl who had drowned in the pool in the basement, and James's untimely death in the home. Both people could be haunting this mansion to this day. It's said that people who pass through a sudden accident or a bout of illness, sometimes their spirits hang around, perhaps unaware that they have died or not wanting to accept their deaths, and this is the case for both the little girl and James. The entity of a little girl is often seen throughout the mansion. There are strange cries that are heard from the basement, in the attic, and objects seem to move by themselves and can completely disappear. There is another entity seen and could possibly be more than one, and they like to take keys and objects and move them to odd places. The library in particular is often completely rearranged, like the books and furniture. And finally, in at number 1 we have French Lick Springs Hotel. Nestled in the small resort town of French Lick sits the massive French Lick Springs Hotel. This legendary hotel was constructed in 1845 and is a crown jewel of the southern Indiana town, but there's more to this resort than meets the eye. This Indiana hotel is known to be one of the most haunted places in the state. Thomas Taggart was a mayor at the time and purchased the hotel in 1888. After purchasing the hotel, he added luxurious furnishings, marble floors, and built 2 championship golf courses. During this time, Taggart became the Democratic National Chairman, and the hotel became the unofficial headquarters of the Democratic National Party. In 1931, Franklin Roosevelt visited the hotel because of its Democratic standing and won the presidency a mere year later. Over the years, the hotel and the work Taggart put into it made it one of the most prominent hotels in the area, and even ran the West Baden Springs Hotel out of the business. Unfortunately, in 1916, Taggart passed away, but according to local legend, his spirit has never left the building. Taggart died in 1916, but that hasn't stopped rumors of sightings of this famous hotel owner. Guests and employees frequently encounter strange and paranormal activity throughout the hotel, and they believe it is caused by Taggart himself. Many spot his ghostly figure near the service elevator and can pick up a strong scent of pipe tobacco. Others claim they witnessed his spirit riding down the hallway on a horse and making noise inside the ballroom. Some hear noises and others encounter his ghost, though usually both don't occur at the same time. Not only is Taggart's ghost living in the hotel, but there are also rumours of a former bellhop that lingers around the hotel. Many believe that he was a current employee until they saw old photos of him hanging on the wall or were told no bellhops were on duty when people had encountered him. Employees and guests say that it's pretty hard not to encounter some sort of activity when you're in the hotel, and due to the vast amount of paranormal sightings are why it's considered by many to be the most haunted place in Indiana and one of the most haunted places in all of the United States.
Kicking off the list at number 5, the Landmark Inn. Located in the upper peninsula of Michigan, right around Lake Superior, you'll find the Landmark Inn. Yeah, nice and cute and cozy. Come on in, take your coat off, stay a while. This fancy hotel was originally built in 1930 as a luxury accommodation for wealthy business owners from all around the United States. Sounds like a good time. Let's gather, let's talk shop around candles. These business owners would visit the Landmark to check on their business interests, all that good stuff. Though for its 100 years being open to guests, the hotel has had multiple reports of, you guessed it, ghosts and paranormal activity. It's so common at the Landmark Inn that the ghost hunters and paranormal investigators, they make trips out to the hotel quite often just to check in and be like, hey, how's it going? And they put on their gadgets and they just check in on them. They can rely on them. The hotel's 6th floor is home to one of the saddest stories the hotel has ever seen. This story takes place in the 1930s when the hotel was a new, lively social and cultural center in town. The story revolves around a ship worker who fell in love with a local librarian and conducted their love affair in the Lilac Room. Yeah, of all places, of course, let's go meet the Lilac Room. Sounds beautiful. And that was where the man was staying. Perfect place to meet. The couple was said to have a planned wedding upon his return from the last voyage on the sometimes treacherous Lake Superior. Unfortunately, their love affair ended in tragedy when his ship met with a storm and sank to the bottom of a lake. He never returned to the shore, and the librarian mourned the man in said Lilac Room, eventually dying herself of a broken heart. The heartbreaking story comes with many reports of the Lilac Room now being haunted. Yeah, rightfully so. As a large number of guests has reported hearing cries and whispers from a female. The female is also seen by many guests and workers on the 6th floor near the Lilac Room, crying and mourning for her loved one. A less romantic story that is associated with the hotel goes back to when it was even finished being built. During construction, a man ended the life of his girlfriend due to anger and jealousy, and this took place right after she told him about her past boyfriends and their relationship history, just normal stuff that he flipped out on, just a monster. And since the hotel was still being built, to conceal the evidence, the man buried her in the unfinished basement. Just horrible stuff. You knew I was going there and you're like, ah, please don't. To this day, decades later, visitors and employees report hearing cries from that basement, and some report hearing whispers from a female voice asking for them to find her body. I just got goosebumps. That's real goosebumps. No matter how much time goes by, these two women, heartbroken for different reasons, still haunt said hotel today. Number 4, Michigan Bell Telephone Building. The Bell Telephone Building can be found in downtown Grand Rapids. It's known from the legend that the building is haunted by 2 ghosts. It's always 2, eh? Always gotta have pairs. Good things come in pairs. Even demons. These spirits have consistently caused chaos throughout the buildings for years in their own unique personal way. We love it. We love a unique ghost. The spirits that haunt the Bell Building are rumored to be Warren and Virginia Randall, a couple who used to reside in the Grand Rapids. Back in 1907, they moved from Detroit and bought the Judd White Mansion in Grand Rapids, which has now been torn down and built into what we now know as the Bell Telephone Building. So a lot of history there already. Over the years of living in this new house, Warren and Virginia's relationship started to crumble as Warren became very strange and paranoid almost, creating hardships in their relationship. In 1908, Virginia became tired of Warren's strange and aggressive behavior, so she decided, I'm out of here, peace. She left him. One night, 3 years after they were separated, Warren convinced Virginia into taking a car ride with them, hoping to get back together, maybe talk it out. The two of them ended up at the Judd White House, where their verbal disagreement turned horrible, and Warren sadly took the life of Virginia. Then he proceeded to end his own life in the very same moment. The tragic accident that happened in the Judd White House became public knowledge, and the house was left empty with no one wanting to occupy it. Yeah, more than fair. I'm like, what's rent? Also, what happened? No. The house remained abandoned for 10 years after the accident until they finally just decided to tear the thing down completely. Thus, in 1924, they built the Bell Telephone Building on the ground, which still is in operation today. Yeah, they didn't tear that one down. That one's still going strong. Due to the horrifying scenes that happened on the grounds of the Bell Building, many claim that the spirits of Randall and Virginia still remain, haunting the new building. Some say that ghosts move into the new building and remain there to this day. I mean, I think that's possible. Ghosts like to move. They like to They can go through walls. They can probably relocate. Through the years of operation in the office building, visitors and employees all report being harassed by strange late-night calls, which have been traced back to be coming from inside of the building itself. Yeah, inside the house. You guessed it. It's upstairs. That's so scary. Due to this and the strange, eerie feelings that the employees feel while they're even working, it's safe to say Randall and Virginia may remain on the grounds. Most likely. They're definitely there. It sounds like they're there. They're for sure there. Number 3, the Henderson Castle. Established in 1895, this castle is a hub for many spirits and paranormal activity. I mean, it's a castle. The original owners, Frank and Mary Henderson, are said to haunt the castle as they passed away back in 1899. Yeah, I wouldn't want to leave either, living or dead. Additionally, other spirits are said to reside in the castle, a young girl and a dog. Yeah, a dog! We've got a dog ghost. How do you deal with that? Ghost barks? That'd be so scary. In 2005, the castle was occupied by Peter Livingstone McNellis and his family. When the family resided in the castle, Livingstone's son, Vincent, before anyone else had ever reported anything strange happening in the house, he said that he saw an apparition of a figure in the Victorian room, originally the changing room for one Mary Henderson. The son said while pointing at a picture of a woman dressed in an old period clothing, some Victorian clothing, that was the woman he saw wearing that same clothing. I would throw up. If someone ever said that, I'd be like, oh, this Victorian painting? And one former innkeeper who stayed at the castle each night told Livingstone on numerous occasions that she also felt a presence coming up and down the staircase, a movement passing her on the stairs when she would walk by. Ugh, these are scary. Top 5 is like, or top 10 is scary fish. This is hard. This is some scary stuff. 9 a.m. I'm already getting spooked. While now the castle is being used for a bed and breakfast, guests have fallen victim to ghosts as well. Yeah, it's not over yet. The Henderson Castle is a very paranormal active ground that many ghost hunters have investigated, and they've confirmed, in fact, that it's haunted by spirits. I trust them. The people that can go into these castles and physically do this, I'm like, yep, I trust your opinion, whatever. He just comes out, he's like, haunted. We're like, thanks, Daryl. This has been confirmed as these ghosts have interacted with many paranormal investigator teams, in addition to guests and employees of the castle. Yeah, they're just harassing everyone. The ghosts seem to be friendly, not evil whatsoever, so that's a good side, I guess, to being haunted by ghosts. They have been known to speak and physically touch guests and employees. Just they touch them on their back, side, shoulder, always in the back. You never see it coming. It's always in this region. Not only that, but there's also been reports of radios making weird noises or turning on by themselves, even though they're either unplugged or just either turned off. Both bad, both scary. Guests and employees have also reported hearing footsteps upstairs, slamming doors from unexplainable sources, and some ghosts have been wearing the clothes that they wore while they were alive. Clothes that they wore while they died in, probably. As the spirit of Mary Henderson has been reported as many guests at the top of the staircase, wearing her usual getup. Imagine being like a clown, like a jester, and then you die in that, and that's what you look like as a ghost. You're like, what? I was doing a mascot gig. I don't want to look like a shark forever. Number 2, Allegan Hodge. The old Allegan Elk Lodge was built in 1909. It was used as a psychiatric and TB hospital until its closure in 1948. The lodge was a former hospital that was frequented by mobster Al Capone, and one that many say is haunted by at least 7 different ghosts. Yeah, you thought 2 was bad. Add 5 more. Now we got 7 ghosts. And it's currently on the auction block in Allegan. If you have a lot of money and bravery, there you go. While the structure was originally built by physician John Robinson in 1909, somewhere in the 1920s, it was sold to a doctor from the Chicago area who had allegedly had underworld ties. That's a great doctor. That's just who you want working on your pancreas. Brought pancreas back today. The facility was supposedly frequented by mafia figures such as Al Capone, the Prohibition-era Chicago mob boss, and his men. Yeah, well, they needed medical attention or when they simply needed to get away from Chicago, this is where they'd go. The old Elks Lodge, Al Capone. He's like, oh, it's cozy. They have great soup. Years later, it was used as an Eagles Lodge and an Elks Lodge. And in 2010, it was acquired by an Allegan woman who began renovating the property, but now she wants to sell it. Yeah, can't imagine why. Because one of the former doctors who owns the lodge had underworld ties, maybe? Something like that? I don't know. It led to a lot of people believing that there's a lot of undercover stuff about this lodge. It's still happening to this day. I don't know why I'm doing this like it's like over there, but I'm like, there's something going on in that lodge. Especially as it's known to hold 7 different paranormal entities, like I mentioned previously. For many years, employees and visitors have told stories of spirits who relentlessly roam the building. Some of the paranormal activity that has been experienced here includes cabinets opening up by themselves in the kitchen, sounds of children laughing, it's always calming in the morning, photographic anomalies captured throughout the building, and like you name it, shadowy figures in the basement, all bad. Notably where the morgue was located. The basement, good stuff, a lot of stuff happening in there. They'd be knocking on the front door, indiscernible conversations, and ringing at the doorbell when no one was present. Yeah, good stuff. Again, I have goosebumps, they're back. Guests also heard footsteps and the sound of hospital activity long after being used as one. They'd also see full-bodied apparitions of children. They would just see ghost children. That would be it. I wouldn't have to see any more. I would just see the ghost children and be like, again, see ya. Like that's. And finally, number 1, Point O Barks Lighthouse. There are plenty of lighthouses in Michigan, and plenty of them are rumored to be haunted, of course, because they're lighthouses and they're creepy, as they normally are. And this one is no exception. Built in 1847, real old, lot of history with this one. The lighthouse is located on Point O Barks. As the legend goes, early to mid 1800s, Peter Shook had been Point O Barks' first lighthouse keeper. He was the OG. In 1849, Peter drowned while he and a couple of friends were sailing to Port Huron to pick up supplies for the lighthouse. He left behind 8 kids and his wife Catherine, and she took over at that point for Peter's duties, thus becoming Michigan's first female lighthouse keeper. Since then, people have claimed to see the spirit of Catherine walking along the edge of a cliff dressed in mourning clothes, as she is still heartbroken by the loss of her lover, of course. As we talked about earlier, ghosts like to wear the things that they were, that they passed away in. Again, would hate to be a clown outfit, that would suck. She had also been spotted in the window of the 2nd floor wearing an apron, along with an apparition being seen, footsteps ascending and descending the tower stairs, and giggling has also been heard. Yeah, you hear giggling and there's cold spots, therefore haunted, for sure haunted. And the smell of burnt tobacco has also been wafting through the air many a times. Lighthouses are pretty stressful, more than fair. When paranormal investigators, specifically the Southeast Michigan Paranormal Society team, when they had a 2-day intensive investigation after their search, they concluded that they believe that there is every reason for the lighthouse to be haunted. The investigators did some electric voice phenomenon work in the living room, and then they heard loud thuds from overheard. Like, where did they get this gear from, Like, I want this gear. I have some questions of myself going on in the apartment. I want to swing it around a bit. A sound of something scraping along the floor as well, and additionally, during their investigation, the rocking chair had moved 2 feet and was still moving. Just love to keep rocking around. We love that. We love haunted rocking chairs. We love unexplainable forces. While they were upstairs, they also reported hearing heavy footsteps from another unknown source. So many ghosts, there's rocking chairs, people moving around, working in the basement. It doesn't sound like the afterlife is a peaceful one, if I'm being honest. Sounds like there's a lot of to do after you die. I'm not really looking forward to it. I thought I could just kind of float around in your paintings, but now it sounds like I'm gonna have to go and wear my morning clothes. Who knows?
In 5th place, we have the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose. Fun fact, California tends to easily be one of the top 5 most haunted states out of the entire United States. And it was a struggle today not making another list with purely locations from, California. The origins for this crazy tale begin in 1881, when the passing of Sarah Winchester's mother, father-in-law, and husband, William Winchester, of the famed Winchester Repeating Arms Company, all happened in under a year, leaving her with a very large inheritance, assumed to be around $20 million, and a 50% stake in the company, making her one of the wealthiest women at the time. If $20 million doesn't sound super rich to y'all, in today's money that would be about $561.6 million. Chump change, right? After living in Connecticut for the majority of her life, an arthritis diagnosis and meeting with a medium convinced Sarah to start a new life in California. She believed her family to be cursed by victims of the Winchester rifle and began construction on what was originally a 2-story, 8-room farmhouse, which she purchased in 1886. She and her late husband shared an interest in architecture, and after dismissing all of the architects she originally met with, Sarah decided to do all of the home planning herself. She was known to rebuild and abandon construction if anything didn't meet her expectations, which resulted in a maze-like design. It is believed that said maze-like design was mainly intended to confuse and keep spirits from harming her and what was left of her family. According to paranormal investigators Mary Jo Ignoffo and Joe Nickel, the bell tower built on the property was used to summon spirits, and Sarah was known to throw lavish parties for the beings she feared in an attempt to please them. It was reported in the San Jose News in 1897 that a 7-story tower was torn down and rebuilt 7 times. Honestly, I respect the attention to perfection, knowing what you want, and having the money to be able to not settle. As a result of her expansions, there are walled-off exterior windows and doors that lead to nowhere, along with staircases that end suddenly, and as the house grew in size, up to 5 additional levels were added to the home. When the 1906 San Francisco earthquake hit, the damage to the home was quite extensive, causing the collapse of the 7-story tower and most of the chimneys. An entire wing was destroyed along with the 3rd and 4th story additions, and pipes began protruding from what were once window boxes. Before the earthquake, the house is believed to have had 500 rooms, and at the time of Sarah's passing in 1922, the house had 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 47 stairways, 47 fireplaces, 13 bathrooms, and 6 kitchens. Visitors to the house today have reported multiple instances of experiencing cold spots, footsteps, cooking smells, odd sounds, whispering, doors and windows slamming, and feelings of being watched. Honestly, I still kind of want to visit it. In fourth place, we have Myrtle's Plantation. Located in St. Francisville, Louisiana, and built in 1796 by General David Bradford on top of a former burial ground, this domicile is believed to play home to at least 12 different ghosts. So brace yourselves for a highlight reel. Our first ghosty story begins with a newly married couple, Mr. and Mrs. Clark Woodruff. Mr. Woodruff was a cruel and harmful man and owned numerous indentured servants, which was the icky norm at the time, and one in particular that he liked to, punish went by the name of Chloe. Now, Chloe tried to protect herself from the wrongful punishments by listening in on the Woodruff's conversations and modifying her behavior, which, is kind of brilliant. Sadly though, one day after being caught eavesdropping, Clark had one of Chloe's ears cut off. Her mutilation was hidden, at the demand of the Woodruffs, by the use of a green turban. Even though most folks wouldn't see the damage, the painful experience would stay with Chloe and inspire her to make plans for revenge. On the 9th birthday of the Woodruff's daughter, Chloe placed poisonous oleander leaves into the cake, intending to only get them sick so she could nurse them back to health and earn a favor with the family. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Tragically, the dosage was lethal, and it ended up killing the missus and the offspring. After word spread of her actions on the plantation, the other servants were the ones to take revenge. Chloe was hanged by the neck for everyone to witness until the life was drained from her body, and then her body was weighed down by rocks and thrown into the Mississippi River. Multiple visitors to the current location have reported seeing the transparent and ghostly apparitions of a young girl wearing a green turban moving throughout the property. In 1992, the owner took a photo that they believe captures Chloe's spirit. This photo was originally intended to be used to secure an insurance policy for the home in case of fire or other natural disasters, not to prove paranormal activity. The presence of a human figure within the photo was undiscovered until it was developed. Many tests have been done to verify its authenticity, but make sure to let me know in the comments what you folks think after seeing it. Alrighty, what's next? Oh, the next owner of the property, a wealthy family man, and his 5 wards would pass away from tuberculosis on the property. The home was later passed to one of his surviving daughters and her husband, the Winters. Mr. William Winter was a proud member of his community and taught Sunday school out of the home. So one day, as William was teaching, an unknown man rode up on a horse yelling to see him. And as he came out to address the man, he was shot at point-blank range on his front porch. William retreated into the home and staggered partway up the stairs before passing away in his wife's arms on the 17th step of the staircase. The sound of his strong and forceful stomps still linger in the home today, as visitors report hearing heavy footsteps from empty staircases. The overall paranormal activity became more noticeable in the 1970s once it was purchased by the Myers family. Oh, right, remember how I mentioned it was stupidly built over a burial ground? The ghost of a young Native American woman has been repeatedly spotted fluttering about. During the Civil War, the house was ransacked by Union soldiers, and legend claims that 3 were killed in the house, leaving a scarlet stain in a doorway, roughly the size of a human body that cannot be removed. In third place, we have the Crescent Hotel. Located in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, it was erected in 1886 and has served several purposes over time, such as a luxury resort, a conservatory for young women, and a junior college. But the strangest mark on its history came in 1937 when it got a new owner, Norman G. Baker. Norman was a millionaire inventor and radio personality who decided to pose as a doctor despite having no medical training and wanted to turn the hotel into a hospital that could cure cancer. He was eventually found out and was run out of town, but his spirit somehow found its way back to the hotel and found some otherworldly company as well. The now operating Crescent Hotel is said to be haunted by at least 8 ghosts, ranging from a small girl to a bearded man wearing Victorian clothing. When current owners Marty and Elise bought the hotel in 1997, they hired 2 certified mediums to do a reading of the building. The mediums found that the hotel showed signs of being a portal to the other side, as in a dimension that holds the spirits of the dead and can be accessed by those on the same frequency as ghosts. That portal is located on top of what used to be the morgue. One thing I like to stress, especially when dealing with angry ghosties, is to never disturb the graves. And a formal archaeological dig was done on the property in 2019, uncovering Norman Baker's bottle grave, with some of the glass containers clearly showing fleshy remains, while others are believed to have held his assorted curing potions that never cured anyone. If you'd like to see them for yourself, they're on display in the Crescent's morgue. Oh, I totally forgot. The morgue, complete with autopsy table and a walk-in cooler where Baker stored cadavers and body parts, are open for public viewing. The experience comes with seeing the ghosts of younglings huddled under the morgue's autopsy table, pleading for help, the reoccurrence of a Baker patient who also served as a hospital assistant being seen in and around room 419, better known as Theodora's room, the early morning loud squeaking of wheels in the 3rd floor corridor, accompanied by sightings of a nurse pushing a gurney full of corpses down the hallway, only to see it vanish into thin air. In second place, we have Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. The castle-like penitentiary took solitary confinement to new levels when it was built in 1829. Prisoners lived alone, exercised alone, and ate alone. When an inmate left his cell, a guard would cover his head with a hood so he couldn't see or be seen. Now, the prison had to abandon its solitary system due to overcrowding from 1913 until it closed in 1970, although the forms of punishment did not get any less severe. Current reported paranormal happenings have included, disembodied laughter, shadowy figures, and pacing footsteps. Yeah. Elaborating now. Cell Block 12 is known for echoing voices and cackling, while Cell Block 6 is known for shadowy figures darting along the walls, and Cell Block 4 tends to have visions of ghostly faces. Many people have reported seeing a silhouette of a guard in one of the towers. Oh, and that might not sound weird, but there's no way to physically get to the top of the tower today, since the brick stairs crumbled away, many years ago. One of the more legendary tales comes from Gary Johnson, who helps maintain the crumbling old locks at the prison. In the early 1990s, he had just opened an old lock in cell block 4 when he says a force gripped him so tightly that he was unable to move. He described a negative, horrible energy that exploded out of the cell, while tormented faces appeared on the cell walls, and that one form in particular beckoned to him. Although executions were not carried out at Eastern State, the prison was home to its fair share of deaths. At least, 2 guards were killed over the years, as were many inmates, with their spirits still very much present. In first place, we have the Hotel Monte Vista in Flagstaff, Arizona. So with tourism on the rise in the 1920s, residents of Flagstaff decided that building a hotel was the crucial, next step in aiding the city's growth as one of northern Arizona's premier destinations. Fundraising began in early 1926, and by New Year's Day on 1927, the hotel was finally open, offering 73 guest rooms under the name Community Motel, which would later be changed to the Monte Vista, a name chosen by a 12-year-old contest winner. This hotel hosted one of the few hidden speakeasies in Flagstaff during Prohibition, which was, a late-night establishment fed by secret tunnels that were built by railroad workers and ran for miles below the downtown core. Over the years, it has adopted quite a few spirits, and I'd like to elaborate on 3 of them. Out of the many rooms in this historic hotel where the spirits of the past like to make their presence known, let's start with room 220, where an unusual one-time resident, known as the Meat Man, is still causing a stir to this day. This long-term boarder, who spent his days at the Monte Vista back in the early 1980s, had a somewhat unusual habit, hanging raw meat from a chandelier. No one has any clue why he did this, but definitely makes him memorable. One day, the poor schmuck was found dead in his room. Nothing suspicious otherwise, and what has happened in that room since that day is why he made this list. On one such occasion, not long after the Meat Man had passed, a maintenance worker for the hotel was up in room 220 making a few repairs. When he left, he turned off the lights and locked the door, but when he returned shortly after, he found that chaos had erupted in his absence. The television was fully on, playing at full volume, and even more distressing, the linens on the bed had been violently removed, ripped up, and scattered across the room as if in a fit of anger. The maintenance worker in question steered clear of room 220 from then on, but even today, guests in the room have reported the television acting on its own accord, though it has long since been replaced, as well as the cold touch of a man's hands. Ooh. Next up, the rocking chair of room 305. So the most common report, which has been well documented, is of an elderly woman in the rocking chair by the window. Guests have long told the tale of the chair moving by itself, knocking against the closet, and some have even seen the old woman herself, gazing longingly out the window. While the woman's name is not known, old stories from the hotel tell of a long-term resident who would, sit by the window, day in and day out, looking out into the world, perhaps waiting patiently for someone to return. Finally, I feel like I'd be cursed if I left out the ladies of room 306. In the early 1940s, 2 women of the night were working their shift, only to be picked up by a man who was staying in, room 306 of the Monte Vista Hotel and looking for some company for the night. The 2 women returned to his room, and that night were brutally ended and dumped out of the 3rd floor window to the street below. What happened to these women was horrendous, and it seems that they agree, seeing as their spirits are still haunting this room, lashing out at anyone who dares to stay there. In the decades since, guests have reported the uneasy feeling of being watched, as well as difficulty sleeping. Men in particular tend to be affected, with some claiming that ghostly hands have been placed over their mouths or throats while they sleep.
Number 5. The Castle of Good Hope. Coming up first on our list of haunted hotspots is going to be the Castle of Good Hope in Cape Town, South Africa. It was first built in the 17th century by the Dutch East India Company, so you just know there's bad vibes there to begin with. It's the oldest colonial building in South Africa, and if you believe the local legends, it's allegedly one of the most paranormal spots in the country. The first reported paranormal sighting from the castle came from 1915, when a tall, pale, mysterious man dressed in black, he sounds familiar, whose attire didn't match the era at all, country or anything, appeared seemingly out of nowhere walking alongside one of the castle's ramparts before vanishing as soon as he appeared. Now that's pretty weird, definitely. Not quite enough to label a place haunted, but it was a one-off incident, right? Well, in 1947, this same strange man kept appearing, making regular visits for weeks on end. He'd be jumping off the castle's walls, seemingly plummeting to his doom, only to reappear again to do it all again. I gotta be honest, he sounds kinda sick, all things considered. Sounds like he just wants to bungee jump and vibe out as a ghost. Another popular story from the castle is that of former governor, one Peter Giesbert van Noot. Whew, you try saying that 5 times fast. He passed in the castle on the 23rd of April, 1728, the same day he had sentenced 7 army deserters to the death sentence. The legend has it that one of these soldiers hexed him and demanded he face him and watch the execution. Van Noot was apparently a bit squeamish and refused the invitation, and later that day was found dead at his desk, slumped over. And some believe his ghost still wanders the castle's halls. And there were more ghosts I couldn't even fit into this one video because there's so many hauntings from this place. I recommend you read up about it afterwards. And if you want way more videos about haunted spots, ghosts, goblins, aliens, cryptids, conspiracies, true stories, fake stories, we got all of that and then some. So click through on Top 5 Scary, find something to watch, something to fall asleep to, I don't judge. Stay subscribed, stay scared, but stay watching this video. We worked hard on it. Alright, moving on through. Number 4, the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. Maybe this one's a bit of an obvious pick, but our next entry is going to be the infamous Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, the real-life post-apocalyptic wasteland of Pripyat. Have you ever heard the word Canopsia? Maybe not. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. I only learned this word today. But it refers to a feeling of seeing an atmosphere that you know is supposed to be populated, but isn't. And I feel like that word definitely applies to Chernobyl, or like liminal is a very good feeling too. It is kind of a liminal space, because you see all of these buildings and you can imagine a life happening there, but it's frozen in time. The Chernobyl blast would be enough to cover a whole video and then some. I heard there was a very good HBO series about it. And trying to cover it in under 2 minutes would be foolhardy, so here's the super quick Coles Note versions, is that a late night safety test simulating a station blackout power failure ended up starting a huge blast, which eventually threw radioactive material that blew all over Pripyat and the surrounding areas, causing everyone to have to pick up everything and evacuate, never to return. 50,000 people used to live here, and now it's a ghost town. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I only know that line from COD 4. All gillied up, best level in the series. That one's just for my gamers out there. Now you can actually visit Chernobyl, although they don't really recommend you do. You know, it's not a fun hotspot for tourism or anything. People who delve into the zone for recreation, or to find things, are called stalkers, named after the Tarkovsky movie of the same name, revolving around visits to a strange zone, and not the video game Stalker, where bandits raid the apocalyptic zone, although you would be forgiven for thinking that. Visiting the zone is no easy task. For one, it's recommended that you absolutely go with a guide or someone who knows the area very well, and then come all the requirements. You mustn't touch anything whatsoever. No vegetation. There are wild dogs that live in Chernobyl, and they're very cute, but you can't touch them at all because there could be traces of radiation in their fur. You have to wear an outfit that covers as much as possible. Big boots, you know, don't show up in your sunners and flip-flops. They recommend wearing a mask too to avoid inhaling any dust or, you know, any of the radioactive particles that could still be floating around in the air. Real life radiation, not half as fun as the comic books. You are very unlikely to come out of here with any web-slinging superpowers. More likely just gonna have a bad cough and, you know, your family's gonna get real sad. You're asked not to enter any buildings because some are so degraded that they could collapse literally at any minute with the wrong pressure applied somewhere, and then you're just another tragedy. Now, I've never been, but from pictures, Chernobyl genuinely seems unreal, like it's not part of the world, you know? It seems like it's something out of a movie or a video game, but it's this harrowing, soul-crushing reflection of our reality, a stark warning on the dangers of nuclear power, and a grim reminder that your life as you know it can be upended forever in but a moment. Number 3, Mausoleum of the First Qin Emperor, Qin Shi Huang. The tomb of former Emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, is notable for many reasons. Maybe it was because in 1974, when farmers from the Shaanxi province were digging a well, they discovered hundreds upon hundreds of terracotta soldiers, complete with horses, chariots, officers, infantry, a court, I think even some bears, oh my. They discovered one of the world's greatest archaeological wonders. 2,000 terracotta soldiers in Qin Shi Huang's tomb. The tomb was built like this basically to serve as history's most impressive flex. Qin Shi Huang wanted to make it good and clear that even in death, he held more might and more power than anyone could ever imagine. You know that saying, you can't take it with you? Well, he wanted to take it with him. He wanted his own army to serve him in the afterlife. The wild part about this is we don't even know how far it goes, since it still hasn't fully been uncovered even all these years later. Those thousands of terracotta soldiers might just be the first wave of guys. While he reigned, Qin Shi Huang wanted to make very sure that his tomb was a good approximation of his legacy, so thousands of laborers worked tirelessly for decades to create an emperor's tomb. They think that 700,000 laborers worked on this for 40 years. That's already unbelievable, but Qin Shi Huang only even lived to be 49, so good thing they got that done in time, eh? Qin Shi Huang himself is buried beneath an enormous pyramid mound that stands a good distance away from the rest of the tomb. Now here's where the haunted part starts to come in. According to historians, this central tomb contains treasures and wondrous objects he attained during his life, including a flowing river of pure mercury, which doesn't really sound like the greatest idea, but back then they thought that made you immortal. Soil testing the nearby areas does have elevated levels of mercury, so that might actually be true. No one is too eager to check though, since it sounds like Qin Shi Huang kitted this place out to keep any would-be Nathan Drakes or Lara Crofts from raiding this uncharted tomb. It's said that it's got ancient ballistas and all sorts of traps like mechanisms that'll fire arrows at potential grave robbers, and hey, that mercury vapor probably isn't doing you any favors, so don't try to breathe that in. In any case, the Chinese government has been in no rush to explore what's down there. It's best to let the sleeping dead lie, especially when the sleeping dead has thousands of personal bodyguards, and it's probably haunted, let's be real. Number 2, Snake Island. Our next entry, Isla de Quimada Grande, is formally dubbed as Snake Island, which really should tell you right off the bat that whatever I'm about to describe is not a friendly place. Traditionally, places are only named things like Snake Island if they're like, you know, filled to bursting with snakes, or if they're home to like a snake-themed supervillain or something. I'm pretty sure the guys who fought G.I. Joe lived on Snake Island. Anyway, Snake Island is called that because by conservative estimates, there's roughly a snake for every square meter of the island, meaning there's anywhere from 4,000 golden lancehead vipers or more living there. There's more snakes than there are people, and that's because most Brazilian locals know way better than to go to an island where one of the most venomous snakes on the planet live. Yeah, I left that part out. Well, I'm talking about it now. It's not just like garter snakes slithering about here. Isla de Quimada Grande is home to the golden lancehead, a beautiful creature in its own right that just happens to be one of the most lethal bites to humans. A bite from this snake can cause, let's list off some fun side effects, kidney damage, necrosis, brain hemorrhaging, venom poisoning, and oh, my favorite, internal intestinal damage. So just leave them alone. Even if for some bizarre reason I've told you all of that and you just love going to places you're not meant to and you're just dying for a chance to go visit venomous Snake Island, you are going to run into a bit of trouble because it's literally forbidden. The Brazilian government strictly monitors those who travel. Naval forces do visit annually to maintain the lighthouse, and there's a research station to study and analyze the local population, but all of these visits are accompanied by paramedics and trained doctors, just in case any of the locals decide to say hello the only way they know how. Am I the only one who thinks the golden lancehead is kind of cute, like in a little weird way? I don't want one as a pet, but I don't know, I think these danger noodles have very cute little eyes, but maybe that's just one of my red flags. And number 1, Povlia. This list has not been pleasant. I guess I should have expected that, given the tone of all of these wretched, horrible, and haunted places. So let's close this list off and find somewhere nice and sunny to get away from all of life's woes. Maybe somewhere nice like, I don't know, Italy? Maybe somewhere off the coast of Venice, like the island of Poveglia? Now, Poveglia is an infamous island in Italian history. It once served as a quarantine zone and final resting place for victims of the Black Plague. You know that one. As the plague ravaged Europe and paranoia set in across the lands, it was said that anyone who showed so much as a symptom, if you had a runny nose, they shipped you off to Poveglia to live out the rest of your days. Oftentimes, they would send people who weren't even really sick. You just complain about a headache trying to get a day off work, and you're on a longboat to the last island you're ever going to go to. It's said that over 50% of the island's soil is made of burned human ash. Let that set in for a second. The ground itself is haunted. In the early 19th century, the island converted from a quarantine zone to a mental asylum because I guess it thought that that wasn't scary enough. The asylum did not do much to improve Poviglia's reputation. Instead of being home to the sick, now it was home to droves of mentally unwell patients being made into victims by a doctor's sick experiments. Cruel doctors at the asylum would impose their patients into lobotomies with no concern for sanitation or their safety, with chisels, drills, and rarely if ever using anesthetic. An old ghost story has it that the main doctor at the asylum was haunted by the spirits of his former patients and the crimes he'd committed, and it drove him to such madness that he cast himself off the bell tower of the island, where they say his screams can still be heard. Now, if I told you all of that and you still want to visit, first of all, why? And second of all, you're going to need to be pretty crafty, as it's totally completely forbidden. You will be pressed to the fullest extent of the law if you're caught trespassing, not even remotely worth the risk if you ask me. At best, you get arrested. At worst, haunted for the rest of your days.
Coming in at 5, the Sultan's Palace. At 716 Dauphine Street in the French quarter of New Orleans stands a 4-story home housing one of the most unusual yet terrifying ghosts, the Sultan. Built in 1836 by Jean-Baptiste Laprette, a plantation owner who rented out his city home when he was experiencing a shortage of cash. However, the man he rented it out to was a little odd. His name was Prince Suleiman, a Turk who claimed to be the Sultan of a mid-eastern country. He had many wives and family members, as well as slaves and servants. Now, things started to get a little weird when folks began reporting that not only did the Sultan's harem consist of many women, but also young boys, with stories of orgies and kidnappings quickly surfacing. However, things took a truly gruesome turn when a passing neighbor made an early morning discovery. They noticed the house was particularly quiet and saw blood dripping from the gallery oozing out of the front door. He contacted the police, and what they found would haunt them forever. Body parts were strewn all over the house, which was also covered in blood. Women, children, and guards were slaughtered and beheaded. However, there was one body that had been left untouched. The Sultan. He had been buried alive with one hand reaching up through the dirt, almost as if he was trying to claw his way out. The identity of the murderer still remains a mystery to this day, and as of today, his angry spirit is said to roam the home, creating unusual noises, playing loud music, as well as making unwelcome advances on passing female residents. Coming in at 4, the Queen Mary, Long Beach, California. The RMS Queen Mary is a retired British ocean liner that sailed the North Atlantic Ocean between 1936 and 1967 for the Cunard White Star Line. She was built by John Brown and Company in Scotland along with RMS Queen Elizabeth, with the ships being built as a planned 2-ship weekly express service between Southampton and New York. However, with the outbreak of the Second World War, Queen Mary was converted into a troop ship and ferried Allied soldiers during the war. Following that, she was refitted as a passenger service before retiring completely in 1967, during which time she sailed from Southampton to the port of Long Beach, California, where she remains permanently moored. However, since that day, claims have been made that the ship is haunted, with Time magazine including it among its top 10 haunted places. According to some reports, one of the staterooms is alleged to be haunted by the spirit of a person murdered there, supposedly anyway. The Queen Mary also explicitly promotes suite room B340, which was a former third-class cabin as, I quote, notoriously haunted. Many ghost tours take place in the ship, including Dark Harbor, which operates during Halloween. As it stands, up to 50 deaths have been logged on the Queen Mary, which truly makes her one of the most haunted ships in history. Coming in at 3, Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia. Also known as ESP, this is a former American prison located in Pennsylvania and was operational from 1829 to 1971. America's most notorious criminals lived in these walls, including Al Capone and bank robber Willie Sutton. Initially designed by John Haviland, Eastern State is considered to be the world's first true penitentiary and was renowned for its revolutionary system of incarceration, also known as the Pennsylvania system, or separate system, which encouraged separate confinement for inmates as a form of rehabilitation. Inmates were housed in cells that could only be accessed by a small door that led to an equally as small exercise yard attached to the back of the prison. Rumour has it the doors were small so prisoners would have a harder time attempting to get out, thus minimising the chances of a guard getting attacked, while others have suggested the small doors forced prisoners to bow while entering or exiting their cells, which is related to penance and ties in with the religious inspiration of the prison. When an inmate would leave the cell, his head would be covered with a hood, so he couldn't see or be seen by others. However, by 1913, the penitentiary was forced to abandon its solitary system due to overcrowding, before closing its doors entirely in 1970. As of today, the penitentiary welcomes thousands of visitors yearly for both its museum and ghost tours, with some folks reporting paranormal happenings including disembodied laughter, shadowy figures, and pacing footsteps. Coming in at 2, St. Augustine Lighthouse, Florida. This lighthouse is a private aid to navigation and an active working lighthouse in Florida, and was built between 1871 and 1874. As it stands, nearly 225,000 people visit the lighthouse annually, due to its reputation for otherworldly visitors. The lighthouse has had many tragedies over the years, with one of its many ghosts rumoured to be that of a lighthouse keeper who fell to his death while painting the tower. Not only that, but 3 young girls also drowned when their cart they were playing on broke and fell into the ocean, with some visitors claiming to hear the sounds of children playing in and around the lighthouse. This haunted location has been featured in episodes of the sci-fi series Ghost Hunters, as well as My Ghost Story. However, researcher Joan Nichol, who investigated the lighthouse, has stated that there is no credible evidence the place is haunted, and instead noted that the spooky noises are just seagulls or even the wind. Party pooper. And finally, coming in at number 1, Leap Castle Island. Leap Castle, yep, it's pronounced Leap, is a castle located in Calderary County, Offaly Island. Now, there are varied accounts of when the castle came to be, with most sources pointing to the 13th century or even as late as the 15th century. Now, it was originally built by the O'Bannon clan before ruling was taken over by the O'Carroll clan. However, all was not well within the castle. Legend has it that during a struggle for power within the clan during the 1530s, one member plunged a sword into his brother, a priest, while he was holding mass in the castle chapel. The butchered priest fell across the altar and passed away in front of his family. The room is now formally known as the Bloody Chapel, with many witnesses claiming to have spotted the priest haunting the area at night. However, that's not all. The castle's history is incredibly macabre. During renovations in the early 1900s, a few workmen stumbled across a secret dungeon in the Bloody Chapel that was housing human skeletons that filled 3 cartloads when hauled away. The dungeon was designed in a way that prisoners would fall through a trapdoor and instantly have their lungs punctured by wooden spikes at the bottom, ultimately dying a slow and painful death. Many tourists have also spoken of a red lady who is reported to walk the halls at night holding a dagger. The castle has become notorious around the globe, with media flocking to capture its paranormal offerings, including ABC Family's Scariest Places on Earth and Living TV's Most Haunted.
In 5th place, we have high school. Ryan Draper and Tori Adamczyk were students at Pocatello High School in Idaho that were interested in films and decided to try to record their own. It starts off innocent enough, with a frame showing a crowded high school hallway before cutting to the night of September 22nd. I believe we have the video, so you can see the transition for yourself right now. The 2 boys are in a car, and you can overhear Brian saying, "We're here in this car." The time is 9:50, September 22nd, 2006. Unfortunately, we have the grueling task of killing our 2 friends, and they are right in that house just down the street. Tori goes on to explain that they had already been hanging out with the soon-to-be victim that evening, Cassie Jo Stoddart, while she was, house sitting for her aunt and uncle on Whispering Cliffs Drive in northeast Bannock County. Her boyfriend Matt Beckham had also been in attendance for the hangout, but went home before the unfortunate events. Cassie had given the friends a tour of the house, including the basement. She was house sitting for her aunt and uncle. The 4 teens went into the living room to watch a movie, but the would-be criminals left before the film ended, claiming they wanted to watch a movie at the local movie theater instead. She was unaware that before the boys left, Brian had unlocked the basement door so that he and Tori could re-enter the house undetected. Sometime after leaving the house on Whispering Cliffs, the duo returned to the neighborhood, parked down the street, got out of their car, and put on costumes consisting of dark clothing, gloves, and white painted masks. The boys entered the house through the basement door that had been left left unlocked, while the couple that was left there were watching television in the living room, as planned, intentionally making loud noises when they got downstairs in an unsuccessful attempt to lure the couple down there. When that didn't work, they found the circuit breaker and turned off the power in the house, hoping, one or two of them would come down to check the breaker, but that didn't work either, and they were freaking out upstairs. At approximately 10:30 p.m., Matt's mother picked him up, leaving Cassie at the house alone. He called Tori's cell phone to see where he and Brian were, and could barely hear him since he was whispering, so Matt assumed the boys were at the movie theater, as planned. Eventually, the boys went upstairs, armed with stabby implements, and attacked and ended the life of Cassie. Afterwards, they filmed their conversation. Why not? With Brian clearly stating that they just killed Cassie, just left her house, and that it wasn't a bleeping joke. He further elaborated on how he impaled her in the throat and saw her lifeless body. A lot of which nope, can't say that here. The footage in total is over half an hour, and it made me sick to my stomach to watch. Both boys were arrested on September 27th, 2006, and eventually received sentences of life imprisonment without parole. Good riddance. In fourth place, we have the elusive White Lady of Union Graveyard. Located in Connecticut, Lorraine Warren, one of our favorite people, used to often take walks through the cemetery in question, saying that it was one of the most haunted places around. Now her husband, Ed, caught the White Lady on camera on September 1st of 1990 at 2:40 a.m. during his 7th night in a row of filming at the cemetery. Determined to have footage as proof, and we can show some of that footage to you now. He described dark figures surrounding her, shapes that he described as wood ghosts that seemed to jump on her while they all argued. Who is this mysterious lady? Because I love a good spooky lady. It's believed she is Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after being born, and Harriet herself passing soon after. Legend believes she may have died in hopes of finding her son, and still wanders her final resting place searching him out. She's described as a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. Many who have witnessed her believe they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they pull over. Others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. In 1993, local firefighter Glenn Powell received a call about a transformer explosion and drove to the scene of the incident with a police officer and observed a female driver following closely behind him on the road. He remembers the night sky had turned pink, and the explosion emitted large amounts of electricity that made the hair in his arms stand up at a close distance. Glenn was driving along the road beside the cemetery when the officer seated next to him yelled, "Watch out!" In the middle of the road was a woman with long brown flowing hair and wearing a white Victorian nightgown. Glenn described seeing a surprised look on her face before slamming on the brakes, but was unable to avoid hitting her, describing it like hitting a brick wall with the back of his truck flying into the air and the policeman next to him being launched into the dashboard. The driver behind him jumped out of the car and helped the two men search the area of the crash to check on the woman, but she was gone. Glenn is quoted as saying there was no red fluid, there was no clothing, there was no body, there was nothing. The footage of the White Lady was considered lost for many years, never making its way to the internet until after the passing of the Warrens, when their son-in-law Tony found the tape in a lost corner and uploaded it here to the interwebs. Glad we've got it. In third place, we have lake monster footage. In June of 2009, a cell phone video of a creature swimming in Lake Champlain near Oakledge Park in Burlington caught some attention. The nearly 2-minute-long video, taken by Burlington resident Eric Olson, shows a creature moving across the mouth of the small cove and beach area at the park. At several points during the video, the whatever it is appears to raise its head about a foot or more above the water's surface. Other times, a portion of what appears to be a torso, several feet in length, can also be seen. Eric has been adamant in saying that he was simply filming the water when he noticed the cryptid and tried to zoom in on it. He says that anyone watching it can see that whatever it was moving both horizontally across the water and vertically, going under the surface and coming back up. He described it as looking very long, but not very wide. Now, Lauren Coleman is a cryptozoologist based in Portland, Maine, and said what Olson filmed with his phone is the best evidence to date of what residents on both sides of Lake Champlain prefer to call champ. He stated that the video should be forensically analyzed and broken down frame by frame by an expert. Before that day, the best known champ evidence was a photo taken in 1977 by Sandra Mancy of Bristol while she was having a picnic on the lake with her family. The photo was verified as legitimate and later appeared in Time magazine and the New York Times. I'm sorry, who was gonna tell me there's oodles of evidence of a sea monster here in Canada? Yikes. In second place, we have stalker footage. Parasocial relationships are the incredibly terrifying, one-sided bond a fan or follower think they have with a public figure, and sadly can lead to scary stories. I'm speaking from experience, and this is one point I won't be elaborating on. Icelandic pop star Björk learned this, sadly, when an American fan sent her an explosive device in disguise and then, offed himself, leaving behind 22 hours of videotape. Ricardo Lopez was described by his peers as extremely bright, but dropped out of high school to become an artist. As well as the videotapes, he left behind an 803-page handwritten diary full of the musings of, someone embarrassed by his body and awkward around girls. Okay, but same, but I'm not a killer. Ricardo escaped his life by reading about the glamorous world of celebrities, fixating on Bjork as his muse that he created art around. But soon the fan love entered the gray area of obsession. And that's the danger zone of being a fan. He recorded himself talking to the camera, saying that being in love, having an infatuation is a euphoric feeling, and he was very happy. He had something to look forward to every day. The diary shows how the fantasy eventually turned, more and more consuming, and how Ricardo slowly became less and less anchored in reality. 3 years into his obsession, he read that Bjork had a lover, and he wrote in his diary about his sadistic plans to inflict pain onto her. Ricardo constructed an explosive device using sulfuric acid and placed it inside a hollowed-out book, also forging a letter from her record company telling her the book was for a future project. We actually have footage of him building that device, and I'll let that play now. He managed to acquire the address for her London home and mailed the package off, in hopes that she would open it and it would explode right in her face. Ricardo went home, still savoring the drama after he mailed it off. One tape showed him saying to the camera, "It went off almost without a hitch. I'm shaking more and more, but I was real cool in there, just a little bit nervous." With his device now almost at Bjork's doorstep, Lopez began the final act for his tape, taking his life. In his video, Ricardo said he knew many killers had families that were brutal, but said his own family was normal and kind, and he played Bjork's music in the background. His last words were, "This is for you," before pulling the trigger. On the video, a kaboom noise rang out, but there was no visible fluids. Ricardo just groaned and fell out of frame. Police found his body 4 days after the incident and were able to stop the package 1 day before it caused the intended harm. On September 16th of 1996, police found the camera and a videotape labeled "The Last Day." Several other cassettes were also nearby, and personally this is the scariest video for me today. I've watched enough Criminal Minds to know premeditated killings are a thing, but this is a whole other level of terrifying. Oh, people. In first place, we have the Paris Catacombs. For those who do not know, the catacombs are a series of underground tunnels that are located underneath Paris that were created during the late 18th century to help alleviate the city's cemetery shortage crises. Fun fact, there are approximately 6 million bodies buried in the catacombs alone, which, you're the one, that's a lot of ghosties. In recent times, however, the catacombs have become a popular place for urban explorers, who have dubbed themselves cataphiles. One significant example of this is a man who took some footage of the catacombs of Paris sometime in the early 1990s. I'll kick this off with a snippet now before I describe it. The footage, which was shot on a black and white video recorder, starts as rather unremarkable, with the man exploring around the catacombs, and hey, he even picks up a few bones along the way. Wouldn't recommend it, but he did. As the video goes on, however, the man begins to walk at a faster pace before breaking into a run and drops the camera before running off into the darkness. It landed in a puddle on its side, and that's where it stayed as it filmed the man's feet running away. The point of view shot became disorienting as he ran, swinging from tunnel to tunnel, seeming to reflect his confusion about which one he should run down next. Sometime after that, the footage was found by a different group of cataphiles in one of the deepest areas of the catacombs, before being acquired by a documentarian by the name of Francis Friedland. He later presented the footage on the second episode of the ABC Family Show, Scariest Places on Earth, in the year 2000. Nobody has stepped up after the initial airing of the episode nearly 2 decades ago, including Friedland himself. Nobody has stepped up after the initial airing of the episode over 2 decades ago, including Friedland himself. No one knows what happened to the man in the video or who he was to this day.
Coming in at 5, West Virginia Penitentiary. Opened all the way back in 1875, the West Virginia Penitentiary in Moundsville is said to be one of the most haunted prisons in the states. The first building constructed on the site was the North Wagon Gate, which was made with hand-cut sandstone. The state used prison labor during the process, and work continued on this first phase up until 1876. Following completion, the prison consisted of the North Wagon Gate, north and south cell blocks, a kitchen, dining area, hospital, and chapel, as well as a 4-story tower connecting the 2 administration buildings. The prison also included space for female inmates and personal living quarters for the warden and his family. Once the prison opened, it housed 251 male inmates, including some who helped construct the prison where they were incarcerated. The condition of the prison worsened throughout the years, and the facility was eventually ranked as one of the top 10 most violent correctional facilities. On Wednesday, November 7, 1979, 15 prisoners escaped from the prison, one of them being Ronald Turney Williams, who was serving time for murdering Sergeant David Lilly of the Beckley Police Department. He managed to steal a guard's weapon and reach the streets, where he encountered 23-year-old off-duty state trooper Philip S. Kesner, who was driving past with his wife. Kesner attempted to take action against Williams, but he was shot in the process. The prison was home to riots, fires, and nearly 100 executions during its time in operation. To this day, visitors have reported sightings of phantom inmates and a shadow shadow man wandering the premises, as well as unexplained voices and cold spots. You can take tours around this haunted penitentiary and even view the electric chair dubbed Old Sparky. For you brave souls out there, you can also do an overnight session if you dare. Coming in at 4, North Bend Rail Trail Tunnel number 19. North Bend Rail Trail is located in Ritchie County in West Virginia and is a favorite for hikers, cyclists, and horseback riders traversing the 72-mile-long trail. However, proceed with caution if you wind up in the area, particularly around tunnel number 19, also known as the Silver Run Tunnel. History goes that on one foggy evening in 1910, an engineer spied a young woman in a flowing white dress standing on the tracks. He brought the train to a stop, but when he searched for the woman, she had vanished. He wasn't the only one to spot her either, many of his predecessors had as well. No one quite knows the origin of the woman in white, although some bones were found under a house near the tunnel. Some people say you can still spot her. Now, those who explore the tunnel are advised to bring a flashlight even during the day, with the tunnel being over 1,376 feet long, which is beyond sunlight's reach. You have been warned. Coming in at 3, Droop Mountain Battlefield. On November 6, 1863, the Battle of Droop Mountain occurred in Pocahontas County, West Virginia during the American Civil War. Confederate forces engaged but failed to prevent Union forces under General W. Averill from a rendezvous with other Federal troops in a joint raid on Confederate railways. Droop Mountain was one of the largest engagements in West Virginia during the war and essentially resulted in the Confederate collapse. The battlefield site is now preserved and administered by West Virginia as a state park, and the unknown Confederate dead are buried in the Confederate Cemetery at Lewisburg. A wooden observation tower, hiking trails, and picnic tables mark the grounds where the Civil War soldiers fought, died, and some say still remain. Many visitors have reported sounds of galloping horses and sightings of the ghosts of headless Confederate soldiers, as well as one soldier lying asleep against a tree. Coming in at 2, Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. In the late 1700s, the Clay family moved to West Virginia, which is presently known as Mercer County. The Clay family, comprised of Mitchell and his wife, settled on an 800-acre farm and raised 14 children. However, in 1783, tragedy struck while Mitchell was out hunting. A few members of the Shawnee tribe killed 2 of the Clay children and burned another at the stake. In retaliation, Mitchell hunted down a handful of Native Americans and killed them. The land in turn became unoccupied for years, up until the early 1900s when Conley T. Snyder purchased the land and built a small amusement park on it. However, the amusement park had just as unfortunate luck as the Clay family. The park featured a Ferris wheel and a swing ride and was popular among locals, particularly families of coal miners who resided in the area. In the early 1950s, a young girl on the swing ride was killed when a truck delivering sodas accidentally backed into the ride, striking her. Another child also drowned in the swimming pool, which was subsequently filled in to prevent further accidents. During its operation, at least 6 people died at the park, which resulted in the park ultimately closing in 1966. In 1985, Gaylord White, a former employee of the park, purchased the land with plans to reopen it. It happened for a brief period, that is, before the park closed again after a 1988 archaeological dig uncovered numerous Native American artifacts, as well as human remains on the property that had been buried prior to the arrival of the Anglo-European settlers. In total, 13 skeletons were uncovered, mostly of young children. Perhaps the property is cursed, or perhaps it's just a series of unfortunate events. Who knows? But one thing is for sure, it is one of the most haunted places in the entire world. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, also known as the Western State Hospital, was a Kirkbride psychiatric hospital that operated from 1864 to 1994 by the government. Originally built by Richard Andrews, it was constructed from 1858 to 1881 and was originally designed to hold 250 people. However, it became overcrowded in the 1950s, with the hospital housing 2,400 patients, resulting in it being forcibly closed in 1994 due to changes in patient treatment. Following its closure, it was then purchased by Joe Jordan in 2007 and is open for tours and other events to raise money for its restorations. During tours of the facility, witnesses have reported doors slamming, shadowy figures, and even blood-curdling screams from within the building walls. The asylum has garnered such a spooky reputation it has appeared on shows such as Ghost Stories, Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, and Paranormal Lockdown. Town. It was also featured in Bethesda's 2018 video game Fallout 76 under the name Fort Defiance and acted as a base for the Brotherhood of Steel, one of the game's main factions.
At lucky number 5 is Joliet Correctional Center. The Joliet Correctional Center, established in Joliet, Illinois in 1858, holds a storied past that is as captivating as it is haunting. This historic penitentiary served as a house of horrors for over 150 years, housing some of the state's most notorious criminals. Within its imposing stone walls lie a rich history of many eerie and disturbing tales. But the most chilling of these tales is that of the murder of the warden's wife in 1915. Odette Allen, better known simply as the warden's wife, was an aspiring singer before marrying her husband, Warden Ned Allen. The marriage would have her move from her home in Los Angeles to living in the Joliet Correctional Center with her betrothed. Odette was incredibly popular among the inmates. She was known to be a kind and compassionate woman who tried to make the lives of the prisoners a little more bearable by offering them small acts of kindness, such as providing treats or lending a listening ear to their troubles. The inmates would call her things like the Good Angel and the Little Mother at the Big Stir, out of admiration for her benevolence. The inmates would often act as servants to her and the warden, as an alternative to hard prison labor. In June of 1915, the warden went to Chicago to meet with politicians about the building of a new prison. Odette didn't join her husband because the dresses she wanted to wear weren't yet ready. One morning, Odette asked for the help of Joe Campbell, also known as Chicken Joe, a prisoner who had been convicted of murder at the age of 29. He was selected to be Odette's personal servant because of his great behavior and his healthy relationship with her and the warden. He was due for parole the next week, and Odette was going to testify for him at his hearing. Sounds like life was looking up for Chicken Joe, but what happened next would tragically bring all these good things to ruin for the young prisoner. The morning of her death, Odette asked Joe to refill her water bottle, go grab her coffee and a newspaper, and to walk her dog. To this, Joe obliged. But then, an hour later, he would return to the house with smoke coming from Odette's bedroom window. Firefighters were quick to the scene, but were not fast enough, as once they extinguished the flames, Odette's charred body was already laying still on the bed. Upon investigation, they discovered that Odette was SA'd and killed before the bed was set on fire, and suspicions immediately turned to Chicken Joe. Joe was the subject of much scrutiny from police, Illinois citizens, and even fellow prisoners. Even after adamantly pleading innocence, Joe was sentenced to death by the court, but his sentence was changed to life in prison at the last second by a sympathetic governor who believed his story. After the tragedy, strange things started happening in the prison. Many inmates and guards would report seeing or hearing Odette still wandering the halls. There have also been some cases of hearing her singing in the nearby prison cemetery. One night in the 1930s, about 5,000 people went to the cemetery armed in an attempt to vanquish the apparition, but no one could find her anywhere. Amidst the chaos, a dozen people went missing, supposed victims of the ghost. Which to me is crazy. Like, at what point are you so scared of a ghost you need 5,000 people just to get rid of it? And they still didn't even find her. Just give up at that point, guys, come on. Anyway, it is said that Odette remains in the prison in order to protect her boys, the prisoners who were inspired by her kindness and honored her after death through their good behavior. Any visitor that would try to disturb her peace would incur the poltergeist's wrath and suddenly disappear. If you were to visit the prison today, which closed in 2002 and was turned into a historical site, there's still a good chance you might come across Odette's ghost, still wandering and singing. Next up at number 4 is the Congress Plaza Hotel. Constructed in 1893 as part of the World's Columbian Exposition, the Congress Plaza Hotel has welcomed countless guests over the years, including prominent figures such as presidents, celebrities, and even infamous gangsters. Its iconic location overlooking Grant Park and Lake Michigan has made it a popular choice for visitors seeking a taste of vintage luxury. But it is the hotel's dark past and ghostly residents that have set it truly apart. One of the most well-known ghosts said to haunt the hotel is that of a ghostly presence known as the Shadow Man. His story dates back to 1900, when Captain Louis Ostheim, a war veteran haunted by the horrors of the Spanish-American War, sought refuge at the hotel on the eve of his wedding. The captain would often experience PTSD-induced night terrors and suffer from extreme anxiety and paranoia. The night of his death, he awoke suddenly after being consumed by a brutal episode. In his disoriented state, he would search for solace or an escape from his inner demons. And tragically, he took his own life. Ever since that fateful night, the spirit of Captain Ostheim has been seen walking through the Congress Plaza Hotel, appearing as a shadowy figure gliding through the halls with a haunting aura. Guests and staff have reported encountering the Shadow Man on multiple occasions, his spectral form silently following their footsteps, as if seeking some elusive connection or unfinished business. Those unlucky enough to meet the Shadow Man's gaze would begin feeling greatly distressed and having night terrors of their own, some meeting the same fate as him after the fact. As the years have passed, the legend of the Shadow Man has become deeply ingrained in the history of the Congress Plaza Hotel, adding to its reputation as one of Illinois' most haunted locations. The spirit's enigmatic presence, coupled with the tragic circumstances that led to his lingering existence, makes encounters with the Shadow Man as eerie and thought-provoking as they are dangerous. Do any of you guys see any ghosts while staying in a hotel? Leave a comment, because I feel like these days every hotel on the planet is haunted. Next, at number 3, is the Englewood Post Office. H.H. Holmes, no relation to Sherlock, was a deceptive figure who gained infamy in the late 19th century as one of America's first documented serial killers. Operating during the time of the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, Holmes constructed a nightmarish building with a name I'm not even allowed to say on YouTube. But for the sake of brevity, I'll call it Death Castle. Officially named the Holmes Castle or the World's Fair Hotel, Death Castle was a 3-story building located on the corner of 63rd and Wallace Street in the Englewood neighborhood of Chicago. From the outside, it looked the same as any other ordinary commercial building, complete with shops and apartments. However, its true purpose was far more sinister. Inside the castle, Holmes had constructed a labyrinth of secret passages, hidden staircases, and windowless rooms designed for his nefarious deeds. He used his magnetic charm to lure and manipulate unsuspecting victims, often young women and visitors to the World's Fair, into his deadly lair. The castle featured soundproof rooms, gas chambers, trap doors, and a chilling basement equipped with dissection tables and vats of acid. Holmes would typically seduce and swindle his victims before leading them to their deaths. Many were asphyxiated with gas, mutilated, tormented both psychologically and physically, and killed in various gruesome ways. Once they were deceased, Holmes would dispose of their bodies through the building's hidden chutes, transporting them to the basement for disposal. His exact number of victims remains a mystery, but it is believed he may have killed anywhere from 20 to 200 people during his spree. His sinister acts continued undetected for years, aided by his ability to change aliases frequently, making it difficult for authorities to track him down. Holmes' reign of terror finally came to an end when he was arrested in 1894 for an unrelated insurance fraud scheme. That castle didn't pay for itself, I guess. As investigators delved into his background, they began uncovering evidence for his horrifying crimes. On May 7th, 1986, H.H. Holmes was executed. Before his death, he confessed to 27 killings, but hinted at a much higher body count. Afterwards, the infamous Death Castle was later destroyed by a mysterious fire, and a post office was built atop the ruins. Within the Englewood post office, it is said that you can still hear the many screams of Holmes' victims. And there have been reports of those who dared venture to the basement, which survived the fire, and you can still see Holmes killing one of his 200 victims, a phantom that echoes the terrifying events that occurred over a century ago. I just got the chills. Next up, at number 2, is a short one. Resurrection Cemetery. Located in Justice, Illinois, the Resurrection Cemetery holds what it is known to be Illinois' most famous ghost, known only as Resurrection Mary. The story goes that Mary was a vibrant and lively dancer who attended the dance hall in the 1930s. One fateful night, she left the hall after an argument with her partner and decided to walk home alone along Archer Avenue. Tragically, Mary was struck and killed by a hit-and-run driver while walking along the desolate road. Since then, motorists driving along the street will often see Mary's ghost walking along the road wearing a white gown and dancing shoes. In some cases, Mary will appear as a hitchhiker, but by the time the car reaches Resurrection Cemetery, she would suddenly vanish, occasionally taking the driver with her. Remember guys, don't pick up mysterious, ghostly women off the side of the road. It's called stranger danger, and we should all know it by now. Moving on to number 1 is Menteno State Mental Hospital. Established in Menteno, Illinois in 1930, the Menteno State Mental Hospital initially served as a psychiatric facility for mentally ill and developmentally disabled patients, offering them treatment and care. However, over the years, the hospital's conditions deteriorated, leading to allegations of beatings, neglect, and the mistreatment of its vulnerable inhabitants. These inhumane conditions only worsened as time passed, with tales of neglect, experimentation, and even deaths due to inadequate medical attention began to spread, shrouding the institution and its reputation in darkness and sorrow. The hospital was at its worst when 384 patients and staff came down with typhoid fever in 1939 in an incident referred to as the Menteno Madness. The director of the hospital mistook the affliction to be nothing more than a case of diarrhea, but when patients and staff began dying, Panic set in. Patients banging on windows, orderlies going missing, doctors deliberately injuring their patients. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. Those who died during the Manteno Madness would later haunt the abandoned asylum after its closure in 1985. Those who visited the old hospital would report seeing patients and doctors alike scurrying about the abandoned halls, but it was those who ventured into the tunnels beneath the hospital that were in real danger. Paranormal investigators have gone down into the tunnels in hopes of finding the rumored ghosts, but are met with a much more sinister presence. It is said that the malevolent doctors who would mistreat their patients wander the complex of tunnels, hoping to release their rage upon anyone stupid enough to enter their domain. What was once a place that healed was now a place that harmed, enthralling thrill seekers to see the mad doctors for themselves, only to pay an unfortunate price. After the repeated disappearances of ghost hunters, urban explorers, vandals, and the like, the building was demolished by Wrecking Ball in 2015 to discourage anyone from entering the haunted grounds.